Good morning, everybody. Sorry for my um, little delay in getting to you here. Always fun with a couple of technical difficulties, but welcome to the Provider Supports Subcommittee meeting for August 14th. I need to just grab one thing here. So my name's Dave Marin with the Office for Catholic Schools and part of the leadership committee for these meetings, and just excited to welcome all of you today and for being a part of this meeting. We are going to do some introductions here shortly and do some other kind of reviews quickly before we get going. But let's see, how many people are on the call? 23. So I think we're going to very quickly go around the room for those that feel comfortable to unmute your microphone and share your name, where you're located, and the name of your center agency. And then just so we can kind of share a little bit and get to know one another a little bit more, in one word. I know that that's a little bit of a challenge. Even if you go to two, that might be okay. But in one word, share the best thing that you've done this summer. So for those that maybe don't feel as comfortable coming off Zoom to be able to share that with us, feel free to put those things in the chat and I will read them out loud. But for those that do feel comfortable, and maybe we'll even have Julie start to get everybody to be able to have everyone feel good. But you can come off mute and introduce yourself and give these particular answers. As Julie's warming up, I'll even do mine. So Dave Mayer again with the I'm in Seattle, work as the early childhood education director for the Office of Catholic Schools, and camping would be the answer for me for the best thing I've done this summer. Julie, do you want to give it a shot?
Sure, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm Julie Schroth. I'm located over in Kitsap County, and I'm also one of the tri-chairs of this subcommittee. And for me, it's swimming, lots of swimming. Katie?
Good morning. I'm Katie with Treetop Village. I am on Kitsap County, and I have 3 sites right now. And one word, I would say camping. Been all over the Pacific Northwest, three states, 7 cities, and then some with my kids. Let's see.
Sandra, it looks like, raised her hand.
I did. Good morning, everyone. Sandra Nelson, Seattle, Washington, Prem ABC Child Care Center, and I attended the Olympics, so I'm still feeling good.
That is awesome. What event did you, what was kind of a highlight event that you saw?
Oh, probably tennis. We got to see about 3 of our American stars, though they lost. But we attended tennis, gymnastics, swimming, basketball, and volleyball.
Wow. That's amazing. That is really cool. Thank you for sharing that. We have a couple in the chat here. Rochelle from Foundations of Faith Children's Academy in Lacey, and her summer activity was beach, which I know we all love. Marlene White, located in Hoodsport right now, DCYF, and gardening is hers. Diana Stokes from DCYF, joining from the traditional lands of Nisqually people, Lacey, and travel for her number 1 word. Melissa Cheeseman, located in Rochester on the unceded lands of the Chehalis Confederate Tribes. Waterfalls, which is a good, sounds like some great hikes. And Taylor Nussbaum, located in Portland, DCYF, whitewater rafting. Anyone else want to unmute and share their introductions? Darlene, how about you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Darlene Guerrero. I'm located in Seattle, Queen Anne specifically. I work with Hilltop Children's Center, and my one word would be renovations.
Oh, hope that is it far enough along where that's going to be something that you can enjoy soon?
Yeah, we're expanding our childcare center, so we're right on target for
Oh, that's
expansion
awesome.
for September. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. Nicole Rose with DCYF, located in Olympia. Just wanted to say good morning to you all and thank you for being here. One word for the summer is outside. Anything outside.
Love it. I love it. Nice to see you, Nicole. Then we have Courtney Parker, located on Bainbridge with DCYF, road trip, which is always a fun way to be able to spend the summer. I've had a couple of those myself. And then Danielle from Childcare Aware of Eastern Washington, located on the lands of the Spokane tribes. Welcome this morning. Anyone else that hasn't had the chance to be able to introduce themselves either via the chat or unmuting and sharing with us, please feel free to unmute. We have Melinda. Good morning, Melinda, from Kitsap County, DCYF, or DCYF, and another vote for beach, which is a popular one this morning. We have Kelsey Boyce in unincorporated Thurston County with DCYF and rollerblading, which is great. And then Aaron with the CE team at DCYF, located in Seattle, and dog fostering, which is a great way to be able to spend the summer outside. Kelly, hold on, that was going fast. Kelly with DCYF, it hasn't happened yet, but in a week or so, Disney. I love it. Always a great way to spend the summer. And Yetta Simmons from Bothell, Cultivate Learning, Sunshine, and Granddaughter are my words, and that can't really feel better than that. I think we've got most people, but I'll give it one more minute. D. Hirsch from Seattle Montessori, and a second gardening one today, which is great. Now we've had a couple people continue to join here. Maria, go ahead.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es María Marín y estoy localizada en Walla Walla. Y mi guardería se llama The Children's Center.
Hola María.
A
ver, voy a traducir para todos.
Y en
this
una...
is María en...
No, continúa.
Okay. This is Maria, and she's from Walla Walla, and she's about to tell us her one word. A ver, ¿cuál es tu palabra?
Pues en una palabra, pues agradecida, porque pude visitar a mi hermana que está en etapa 4 de cáncer a México, y eso para mí fue una, pues estar agradecida que pude verla.
Gracias, María. And Maria's one word is grateful, because she was able to visit her sister in Mexico who has cancer. So she's grateful she got to see her.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And thank you to the note in the chat about slowing down. I apologize for that. We will make sure that that happens. Janelle.
I'm going to lower my hand right now so I don't forget. Janelle Waterman from Newport, Washington with Lucky 9 Childcare. And I concur with the outside part of summer, beach and gardening and all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ursula.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ursula Montor, and I am located in Pasco, Washington. And I am a homeowner. The name of my home childcare is Loving Shades Bilingual Academy, and my one word is graduations.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And Susan has put in the chat, she's with Kids Company. A re-landscaping project is keeping her busy this summer. Right. And also just a note for those that can't see the chat, we do have simultaneous interpretation. You just need to switch to English At the bottom of the screen, there's an option to choose your language so that you can also hear the English translation. Hello to Gloria in Wenatchee, a family childcare provider, and the best thing this summer is to join the cultural event. And Gloria, I'll have you say if you're able to where you were for that event. And then Veronica with Busy Bees Academy, located in West Pasco, and her word is family. All right, one more 30 seconds for anyone else that may not have had a chance to introduce themselves, either unmuted or via the chat. We have Katrina with Northwest Center in Seattle. Ocean is her one word. So amazing. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think we are ready. Oh, and then we have Jamie with the Whatcom Family YMCA in Bellingham, and one word is water. It's been a pretty popular one this morning. Beach and water and ocean. Wonderful place for us to be able to spend time this summer in this great state. All right, I think we are ready to move on to the virtual meeting protocols. If that is the next slide, I'm not sure. Just as a quick reminder, throughout the webinar, please mute yourself unless you are speaking or responding to a question. And I think we've done a good job over the course of the last few meetings of using that hand raising mechanism as well. And so if that's something you're comfortable with, please feel free to do that. We will have question and answer portions dedicated throughout the meeting. But feel free to use the chat box to post questions or comments at any time. And when there are some natural stopping points in conversations, we'll go back to review those to be able to make sure that all those have been addressed. If for any reason you place the call on hold and music begins to play, your call will be disconnected. You're more than welcome to rejoin the meeting at that same link once you're available again. And individuals that are using a webcam or video option will be displayed throughout the meeting. And it's obviously understand why people don't have those on for a variety of different things, but always wonderful to be able to see people's smiling faces if available. And then if you have any questions or technical difficulties, please contact via the chat box or at the email that's listed in the slide. All right, now I think we are ready to review a few of the meeting materials. So let's go to that first part. The first one is the meeting minutes from June. So this is copies of the last meeting minutes that were sent out in advance via email for you to review. And so if you haven't had a chance to be able to do that yet, we can have everyone take a look at it quickly. Jessica was just able to put those in the chat. So we'll wait a minute for people to review those and then ask for any questions that anyone might have about any of the things that popped up in the meeting minutes from from June.
Jessica, is there not a link that, I don't want to have to download the document to read it? Is there another link?
The link should be in there. The document is in Spanish. Link's just right above it.
About 30 more seconds just to kind of scan through that document. All right, so for those that were at the meeting or those that were not able to be at the meeting and are just looking at this for the first time, does anyone have any questions or clarifications from the meeting materials from June? All right, well, thank you to those that put those meeting minutes together. And if this morning was your first time taking a look at those since June, and throughout the meeting you have the opportunity to be able to read through it further and something pops up, please feel free to use the chat to put those questions in there if you did not have enough time to be able to review it this morning. Also in the agenda were the agency updates. And so I'm going to give another minute to be able to read through those agency updates. And as one note on those agency updates, we will have Nicole with us at the beginning of this meeting to be able to talk through develop. So if we hold any questions about that until that presentation, that would be helpful. But if you want to take a quick look, Jessica, again, just put both the link and the PDF into the chat. It's about just a short page and a half of agency updates. So if you want to scan that over the course of the next minute, then we will again provide another opportunity for questions at the end of that minute. Just about 20 more seconds to read that, and then we'll open to any questions. All right. Just one note in the chat from Julie. Since our last meeting, DCYF emailed with several dates, locations for community childcare forums. Are there any other questions from the agency update?
Hey, this is Susan.
Yeah.
Oops, I just realized my, when they list things like, under the rulemaking updates, rather than putting in a link to where you could go read this, could you just like bullet point or highlight what the updates are so we don't have to research them or read other documents that would, or summarize it so that it's easier for providers to just know what they are before we actually have to take the time to go digging into it. So that would be a request that I have on future updates. I don't know how other people feel, but when I have to keep going down another bunny trail, it's just like, oh my goodness, couldn't they just summarize it? That's my request. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And just as another note, Jessica did put the community forums document into the chat as well. D in the chat, when I went to the forums page, I did see other forums planned, including Seattle. There was no further detail on what to expect for agenda or engagement at the forums. Not sure if there's anyone here from DCOAF that might be able to speak to D's question.
I can speak to that. So
Thanks, Erin.
regarding agendas, these are meant to be more open forums. So we're not going to be coming in with structured agendas and a list of items to speak about necessarily. There might be an announcement or two to share, but the purpose of the forums is for providers to have an opportunity to ask questions and engage in conversations that they want us to talk about. So there's not a super structured agenda provided.
Excellent. And Erin, when the emails go out about the specific forms, are they geographically targeted or do they go out to all licensed providers?
That's a good question. So they're going out to the whole mailing list right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Regardless of where they're located.
Yes.
Okay. And then for those that might not be able to see the chat, Nicole did drop in the community childcare forums aim to strengthen relationships between providers and the agency, allow providers and DCYF to share what is going well, and foster opportunities for ongoing collaboration. Looks like Julie has a question or comment.
Yeah, I just had a comment. When we had one of these in November in Bremerton, we did have Diana Stokes there. I know she's not the professional development person anymore, but she is the knowledgeable professional development person. So I'm wondering if they're still having a professional development person go to all these community forums, because it was really helpful.
So Julie, I think you're referring to the community cafe you guys had in November, which is kind of similar, but it's not the same. So community cafes are usually initiated by local providers, and oftentimes they'll have specific topics they want to talk about, and they arrange that directly with the licensing team. It's a similar concept to the community forums, but these are DCYF initiated, and it's primarily local licensing staff that will be there, but also program leadership and subject matter experts as well. I'm not sure if necessarily that means a PD person would be there at every one. Nicole or Amy could clarify that, but it's just slightly different kind of event.
Yeah, and thanks for asking that, Julie. We still do some of our PD webinars. There's the navigators you can reach out to, but at the forums, those include myself, Amy, Jason Romike from Subcommittee, and Tiff Lee, who oversees the professional development team, has been attending those as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions on the agency? Any other questions about the agency updates? All right. Good questions and feedback. Our last piece is the feedback loop, which Jessica has kindly, again, put in the chat with a link to it. So we'll give one more minute on reviewing that feedback loop that was also included in the agenda. And then ask if there are any questions after that minute.
My daughter is here for me.
Another 20 seconds. All right, does anybody have any questions or comments on anything that they scanned through on the feedback loop? And again, if you didn't have time prior to the meeting or right now to obviously scan through the whole thing, if you do so during the meeting and you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can address them as we move through the agenda today. Dee does have a question. What has the financial commitment to, oh, Dee, we're gonna move into develop here actually as our first presentation. And so we'll have Julie introduce Nicole and we'll kind of hold your question and have that be addressed here in this first section. Any other questions outside of develop for the feedback loop? All right, well, I just want to thank everybody for being here again today and for sharing about your summer adventures. It was fun to learn about what everybody is into. It sounds like we have a great group of people that are at the ocean, gardening, traveling, and I hope that everyone's really just had a wonderful time being with their families and enjoying those activities. I'm going to pass it now over to Julie, who is going to get us started with the introduction to our first presenter today.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, you all probably saw the email that develop is not happening anymore, and I know some people are disappointed. But we've got Nicole here today. She's DCYF's Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, and she'll be able to discuss and answer questions related to develop. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks all. And so, Dee, I'll go through some of this and then I'll come back to your funding question. And so I think one of the things I would start with is while we are not moving forward with develop, that doesn't mean that we aren't committed to looking at the functionality and the things that we were hoping to do with develop. So if we want to go to the next slide. So I know Karma and others had come to this group several times and talked about develop, and we had anticipated that it would be ready this summer. And those timelines continued to get pushed back for a variety of reasons. And some of it was that all of the development wasn't done for develop to be ready. And some of the things were related to as we were doing the work, the scope of the work was continuing to grow as we were thinking about what the agency as a whole needed, even though this really started as an opportunity to take a look at our early learning management system. And so as we were going through some of that, we really needed to pause and do some analysis, and that analysis led us to the decision to not move forward with develop. And so if we go to the next slide, I can share a little bit more about rationale. So as I shared, we had lots of interest in a new agency that serves birth through 25 in thinking about how do we have a way that we can have a learning management system that works for all of our providers. And that really broadened the scope and timeline for the project. And there are also some other timelines that are happening within the state that had an impact here. So when we did the initial RFQQ for this, that was all the way back in 2018. And I think that, there's a couple of things about that as well. 6 years is a long time in technology time. And 6 years is a long time in thinking about what are the needs of an agency, what are the needs that we have in a system, what should the current project look like. And so we really needed to, like I said, take a little step back and reevaluate that. As I shared, this doesn't mean that we're not committed to looking at what was needed as we think about our learning management system and our workforce registry. And so we'll continue to do that work. And if we want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how this impacts providers, and then I can share more about sort of where we're headed. So really what this means is that you can continue to search for your trainings and merit, and that early learning providers and other professionals can continue to find and complete required trainings in DCYF's online training portal. So it really doesn't mean a change to you all in the way that you're doing things right now. And Merit will, if we go to the next slide, Merit will continue to be the place where all of your employment training and educational accomplishments get recorded, employee records for a facility or a site are managed. Jessica or someone, do you want to advance it to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. Where portable background check applications are completed and licensors view records and conduct the monitoring process. So part of what we're in the process of doing right now is revalidating the business requirements as we think about what's needed in a learning management system, and doing that agency-wide, not just early learning. And so this is going to require support from our business teams, the Merit team. It also means that we will, take all of the information that we've heard from you all about what the needs were and make sure that those are still relevant. So once we do all of that, we'll really do an analysis to determine what gaps exist within our existing systems and determine any next steps moving forward. And part of what we'll also need to do here is follow our processes internally around IT business need. And then when you undertake an IT project at the state level, you do have to work with the OCIO, the Office of the Chief Information Officer. And so we'll be following all of those processes as we move forward. What this also means is we're defining a governance structure for this new direction for Merit and Rivertown Inspire. So those are the two systems that you're working in. And I'll take on that executive sponsor role for doing this work. And what we really wanted to make sure of is that as we roll something out, that we're really keeping user-centered technology solutions in mind. And ideally, we would have a place where providers could go to one place and enter their information, find their trainings and all of those things. And I'm just going to be real transparent that where we were headed is that you were going to have yet another system to go into. So you would be logging into 3 different places to do things. And I just don't think that that's beneficial to anyone. And so we really needed to, like I said, given, looking at the scope and knowing that other folks in the agency, we have a need related to this, we felt like it was really the best thing to do, to take a step back, take a pause and say, all right, we've got an opportunity in front of us to relook at this and make sure it really works for everyone. So that's where we're headed with Develop. There was a question about resources and what was the financial commitment to Develop and how is that resource to be allocated to Merit. So much of this work was done either within existing resources or within one-time preschool development grant funds. And so we'll be working within our existing resources to do some of this analysis. And then likely what would occur is if there was a need for additional resources, just like we do in other places, we would need to follow the decision package process. But right now, we're really just making sure that we understand what all of the requirements would be, that we're really, again, using user-centered design, not having folks have to sign in to 3 different systems to do what they're doing, and making sure that we get a product that will work for all. So I will pause there for questions. And I want to acknowledge folks were excited about having something that we believed was going to work better. But like I said, things were not going to be ready until at a minimum this fall or even early next year. And we were still going to be at a place where there were multiple systems folks were going to have to sign into.
Hi, Nicole, this is Katie. So I will say that I was super bummed out that this wasn't moving forward. I was looking forward to it for my staff so much, especially for having like 30 hours online and just to have one site. But in the beginning, did you guys foresee any of this happening? I mean, it's good to know that it was with a grant and with existing funds, because that was going to be one of my questions. But did you foresee that it was just going to be bigger than what you thought? And like, who was it who came to the decision to just stop the project?
Yeah, so those are great questions. So I think one, that it really, when the RFQQ went out, I believe it talked about, potentially looking at things a little bit more broadly. But always was the intent to start with early learning first. And as far as the decision that was made, this was a joint decision across a few of our leadership here at DCYF that was made after we had some folks go in and do some analysis for this. And so this is not a decision I made on my own. This is a decision that our Deputy Secretary Chief of Staff and our Chief Information Officer were all in alignment on. And this was based on analysis and feedback that we got from one of our IT team members who did some analysis for us.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate all the information today, as once I got that email from DCYF, I was just like, what? We've been waiting for this for so long. So I hope something still comes about down the line and that we'll have more resources for our staff.
Nicole, is there any, I know that I've mentioned this before on other meetings, but it would be nice if Merit could at least link to some of the other things that we have to log into. It's been requested a lot. Even, I talked with Angela Abrams about it years ago, and it just would be helpful to have one place where you could at least click it, even if the logins are all different, right? But just a link.
Yeah, or even just and so when you go into Merit, you're not able, so I can take that back as a follow-up, Julie, but I think that was part of this too. So you're not even asking for a single sign-on. You're just saying, when I'm in there, is there a link to the other programs I need to get to?
Yes.
Okay. I am writing down that note. Okay.
Yes. All right. Susan put in the comments, she appreciates that DCYF made the decision to reverse undeveloped unless the outcome is better and more efficient providers benefit from less work, not more. And Dee said, besides Merit and the learning portal, we also log into WaCompass. Yeah.
All right, and I see Maria has her hand up too, Julie.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. Maria, did you have a comment? Question?
Sí, yo solamente quiero preguntar si cuando pensaron en el programa y todo eso, sí pensaron en que algunas proveedoras, pues muchas podemos usar tecnología y muchas no podemos usar la tecnología. ¿Pensaron en todo esto? Nada más esta es mi pregunta.
Hi, I'm jumping in. So really quickly, just so everyone knows, we do have interpreters here on the line, but because of how Zoom works with all of the channels, when the meeting is happening in English, the Spanish speakers are in a different channel listening to the interpreters, and the interpreters can't come back here and like interpret it. So I'm going to be doing that, just a heads up. Maria's question was when you were looking at develop and all of these things, did you ever account for providers who cannot use technology and have challenges with technology in general?
So Maria, that's a great question. I think that we're in a space where technology is part of our daily lives. And I think, part of what we want to do is make the use of that technology as user-friendly for providers as possible. And I think, that's part of why, logging into multiple systems, adding another system was a system that wasn't likely to have some of the functionality that you all wanted for at least another 6+ months. That's why we made the decision to put a pause on things. But there's always going to be some form of technology, and we do want it to be as user-friendly as possible.
Maria, if you could just lower your hand now. It's just a good reminder for everyone that we need to lower our hands when we're done with our
Sí,
question.
disculpen, ahorita la bajo.
All right, so I appreciate you being here, Nicole. We all do. Thanks for the update about develop and the reasons that kind of fell apart. We are going to move on to our next topic. Katie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So our next 45 minutes are going to be going over the early learning licensing WAC revisions and what they're working on. And so today we have some presenters from that agency part with Brett Skinner and Ann Radcliffe. And we're excited to see what's coming up with these revisions, because I know Julie and I have been questioning this for a while. So I will turn it over to you guys. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Radcliffe. I am the Licensing Division Policy, Communications, and Change Management Administrator, here with my child care policy expert, Brett Skinner. You want to say hi, Brett?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having us on. Excited to talk and discuss and make sure things are making sense and we know where we're going.
So next slide, please. So today we are going to be following up on some questions from the last Provider Support Subcommittee meeting on June 11th. We have some Q&As to kind of answer, and then we had been asked for a preview of a list of upcoming childcare WAC subsections for a revision. We'll be kind of going over those general categories and giving you the reason why we have them up for change. We are not going to be giving you all of the wording because we're just at the very beginning of this process. After that, we'll outline the next steps. So next slide, please. I apologize for the small wording on this slide, but we'll go ahead and kind of read through some of them. So in the 0106 category, where we are allowing extra time for first aid CPR for those new hires of yours, one question was, why wasn't this change also included in the 110.302 chapter, which is outdoor nature-based? And the reason for that is that outdoor nature-based programs have increased risk. Groups of children can be very spread out in those ONB programs. And it was a leadership decision not to allow extra 3 months, but to have those staff people in OND programs be have their CPR first aid already in place when they start. By the way, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat, and whoever is monitoring that, you can let me know if we need to stop and answer those. The next one, why must we have one staff person trained in first aid CPR in order to count in ratio? So this was specifically around school age. The answer to that is that school age programs operate with this little higher ratio, 1 to 15, and a group size of 30. So those groups can be one group inside, one group outside. They might be separated from each other. And so our childcare leadership said, with that decision, we want to have at least one person trained in every group. Next question. The bloodborne pathogens training, could it be extended to 2 years? And unfortunately, that is a decision that we in childcare licensing could not make because that's an LNI requirement. They have very specific timelines. So after the initial bloodborne pathogen training is completed, there is an annual review, and this review can be met in a few different ways. Could be trained on site by the director or the licensee, and bloodborne pathogen is also a CCDF requirement. The next question, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going through these quickly. I know last time Travis and Debbie were able to kind of answer them as we went, and some of them we just promised we would follow up. Unfortunately, neither one of them are able to be with us today. They're double, triple booked. So Brett and I are just kind of reading off the answers. If we have follow-up questions for them, we can certainly take them back. Oh, CCDF, Child Care Development Fund. This is the federal funding that provides our licensing staff with the funding to provide all childcare related licensing work. And when the federal government tells us that bloodborne pathogen is required, then it's something we have to follow. Where can we obtain these trainings? That is first aid CPR. In the rule, it says it needs to be certified by the American Red Cross, American Heart Association, Health and Safety Institute, or other nationally recognized programs. You can search online to find them, but make sure that it says they are certified. And let me quickly do a check here if there are any questions for me. Looks like it's about to fill up. Okay. So go ahead and let's go to.
And this is Melissa. There was one question. It was, what is CCDF? So just, and it was spelled out. Nicole went ahead and spelled it out. So if you're going to use any acronyms, just be cognizant of that. So, but thank you. I'll keep an eye on the chat for you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. CCDF, Child Care Development Fund. Yeah. And Brett's gonna.
And just for, I mean, the Child Care Development Fund is something that, you know, internally we have to make sure that we're hitting all of those standards, or we won't kind of be able to like operate. So, oftentimes we're looking to make sure that we're in compliance, and there's sort of like an auditing process that goes on. And it's all about, you know, accountability, making sure that we're following through, that things are being done in a meaningful way. So that's not something that always gets talked about, but it's something that's kind of always there in the background. So more follow-up, and again, Anne said that we kind of talked about this at the last meeting, but there was a question regarding, or there's a bunch of questions regarding family home capacity waiver. So this is kind of a big switch, and it was around building code, fire code, and there's an update going on that basically changes the rules and requirements around having a waiver. So, you know, in the past, there was a hard cutoff at 12 total children in a family home setting. And then during COVID, there was a waiver process set up to allow for more capacity. And so we went beyond that 12, and we're sort of granting these waivers for more and more children. And then, you know, over the last year, there's been a lot of conversations from fire code, building code around the legality, around the safety of this. And so one of the questions that has come in was emergency lights. Can they be battery operated? Because there's more updates and more requirements if you're going to go beyond this 12. And And kind of the answer is that it's all going to be kind of determined by your local building codes. So that is, you know, just a piece that you're going to have to check in with your local building folks. A second one that we kind of talked about was, you know, for folks that currently are holding one, will they be grandfathered in? And the answer is no, because it is a building code and fire code piece, and it's a serious health and safety situation. And what's been happening is communication's been going out, and trying to let providers know, trying to work with their families to understand that this will be coming, and to make the enrollment a little bit easier. Granted, it's tough, it's hard. People have invested money, people have done a lot of things, and I think we understand that. We understand how hard of a switch this is for providers and for families. So we've been trying to ease this in into January. Is kind of when we're thinking. Sorry, was someone asking a question? Well, I see Janelle, related to capacity waiver. What about sprinkler system? Is this a state building code requirement or local? There is going to be, yeah, some flexibility where you're going to have to look into your local building codes to see. It's kind of my understanding that I think a lot of them will require it, but there's going to be more communication that's coming out as some of these processes get finalized. But that's my understanding, is that you have to check in with your with your local codes to see how that's going to work in your county or city. So I would check there first, and then go from there.
And also, I'll just jump in really quickly. It's with your local, but it's also with the state fire marshal and when they come on site. So usually they are cohesive in what they expect, but sometimes they can differ from each other. So local and state fire marshal is where you would want to talk to Janelle.
Thank you. That's great. And I think you can go to the next slide. And so again, this is follow-up. One of the WACs that's being changed is around prohibited behavior. The question was, what about negative behavior exhibited by parents when on site at childcare facilities? So again, this is a challenge that providers can run into, where say we're around pickup or drop off time, you have a parent that comes in, you know, they could use profanity, they could be doing things that are outside of what the childcare rules are. And so I think there was some questions asking around, is this WAC sort of enforcing the parents? And sort of the answer is that, you know, this can be included in parent policies. So this is outside of what the WAC is actually changing. But what providers can do is always talk about the termination of services, you know, put that in your policy. It says expectations and requirements of the program may include unpaid bills, continual late arrivals, or parent, guardian, family members' inappropriate or unsafe behavior in or near early learning program space. So it was kind of a clarification that the WAC that we were changing wasn't around when the parents are doing that kind of inappropriate action, but providers can always put this into your program policies and procedures, and point to that if parents are being inappropriate. So we were kind of trying to make that clarification. And then there was a suggestion on rewording the title of the section of the WAC to make it clear. And the answer to that is yes, we agree with that title of the section should be reworded to prohibited behavior and discipline and physical separation of children. So someone had brought forth a suggestion that we change some of the wording, and so that was included and accepted to make that change. Any questions on that one, that slide?
So if you guys agree, how quickly does the WAC actually change? You know, when would it be coming out, or is it out, I guess?
So we are on a timeline trajectory where these three groups, we kind of refer to them as our mini negotiated rulemaking kind of batch. These three sections of WAC over the different chapters are kind of on we're on a final version right now of this wording. It will be filed in what's called a CR 102. CR stands for Code Reviser. They're getting ready to, in the Policy and Rules Office, getting ready to file these. Then what happens is a 30-day public comment period. So you still will have another opportunity to look over these and enter your comments. And then depending on what comes in, we get our childcare leadership folks to finalize that wording, and then it moves forward. And we're hoping that these three sections will move forward, I would guess, by the end of this calendar year. It's a long process to get rules changed, as you know, but we are kind of on this path of moving forward with these three. I see Julie's hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I have two questions. One is about this negative behavior exhibited by parents. Over in the answer part, you guys have a quotation in there. Is that going to be included in the WAC? I'm concerned that a provider might read that and think that terminating a parent for their behavior is limited to what's in the quote.
Good question. May include, I see the words. I think that kind of leaves it a little open, like it could be this, but it could be other things, Julie. And I think that is up to you all to put into your policies, right?
Yes.
So Julie, I just so this is a WAC that's already there. So this is already within WAC already. So I think that this being like quoted here is just a reminder that if a parent were being inappropriate, you could show them this WAC, and you could say, hey, you know, please stop, you know, using profanity in front of the children, or, you know, maybe someone's smoking a cigarette and walking up to the door or something like that, and they're not wanting it. So I think that why this was quoted is to be helpful, because I think that in family home settings, I know that can it can be hard to have some of those conversations with parents when you have an
Sure. I was
intimate
just thinking that if
relationship.
it said something like may include a variety of reasons, for example, because I would hate to have anybody think that they couldn't terminate a family who behaved in a certain way that wasn't described within the quote. I also wanted to ask a different question about, I would say more than 6 months ago, we had a meeting with, and Debbie Graff had attended, and she had said, we have so many WACs that were maybe complained about or something. Providers reached out for a variety of reasons, probably licensors too, I don't know. And she said, so we have this list of WACs that she had inherited when she took the job, that she was saying these are going to be considered for revision. And
yep,
I've been wondering if that list could be made public.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if we're going to see that today.
That is exactly what we're planning on.
Okay.
And I remember, Julie, last time you had said, you know, we've got the petition process, but we'd hate to have to, you know, petition things that you are already planning on doing. So that's coming up. I'm glad you said that. Any other questions so far on these follow-ups from June? If not, we can move to the next slide. So great segue, Julie. Originally, we had identified many WACs that we had on our list. These suggestions had come in from childcare providers, from our licensing staff, from childcare leadership, and through ELAC, the Early Learning Advisory Council. We had probably 45 suggestions for each chapter. 3 chapters of childcare WAC, 45 or so on our list. And we were trying to get these ready, and we wanted to roll them all out. And our DCYF Policy and Rules Office, PRO team, asked us to limit them for now. So the reason we are limiting them is because, if you're aware or not, DCYF is undergoing many changes right now. Lots of other programs within DCYF are also revising their codes and their rules. And we were asked to please limit them to the serious or immediate risk levels on the checklists. So what we did is we took our want list with this list of the serious and immediate risk levels of the WACs, and we kind of did a comparison. We agreed that we would do a limited number of WAC changes at this time, because in the future, the goal is to take all 3 of our childcare WAC chapters, 110-300, 110-301, 110-302, and completely revise them in a style that has been adopted by other divisions within DCYF, more of a plain talk, more of a simple to read and understand kind of way. At this time, we're not going to undertake that overhaul, but that is coming. Ruben Reeves, our our licensing division secretary, has committed to that. That's in the future. For now, we're going to go through this list, the list that you asked for, and just kind of explain why these kind of went to the level of serious and immediate health risk. And these are the ones that we're going to be proposing next. So next slide, please.
Okay. Here, if you look at this graphic, basically what Ann talked about is we've got three different chapters. So we have family, home, and centers, and we have a school-age chapter, and we have an outdoor nature-based chapter. So ONB is outdoor nature-based. So they each have their own set of WACs. So if you can pull them up and you can look at them. So the little X indicates whether this WAC change is included in that chapter. So most of the changes that are going on are of similar nature. There might be a tiny bit of difference within these. And then to Ann's point, we're kind of putting the summary or the reason for change kind of on what's happening. In some of these, it's simple change. It already kind of makes sense what's going to happen. But again, there's lots of things that will happen before these are finalized or anything like that, including bringing them all to you all in a different format to provide feedback. But we wanted to be as transparent as possible, and Julie was requesting it, so we tried to do the best that we could with this. So in this general staff qualifications, the changes about clarifies requirement dates for certificates, clarifies what regular ongoing volunteers must complete. you know, for like background check and TV and that kind of stuff. There's been some confusion around that. And so this is an attempt to make that clear, and to sort of solve that. In the second one is 0166, emergency preparation and exiting. And it requires exit pathways not be partially or entirely blocked. So there's some confusion with providers and with licensors out in the field on some of these situations. And so this will hope to clarify some of the situations where there's dangerous blocking that is occurring in those pathways, where I think the language didn't include that, and so it's problematic, or people were doing things where that was potentially unsafe. So that's being added in. So food allergies, parent and garden provided food, written food plans, individual care plan. Simplifies these 3 WAC sections, eliminates duplication of rules and possible double citing. I think it's confusing. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of referring back and forth. And so the conversation around how do we make this easier for folks on both sides? How do we make this process a little bit more simple? I know there's been a lot of discussion that we've been hearing from you all and from staff around it gets confusing, or maybe it's too much in some circumstances. Julie said, will new language come to this committee for discussion before it is finalized? Yeah, so I mean the goal is you know, taking the pieces, getting to some level of rough draft of what we've been hearing and what we think some potential solutions would be. And then we would bring that in you know, an NRM, like some form of NRM where people can come, show up, provide feedback. That would be like an opportunity to show up and speak, you know, in a virtual setting probably, and to provide comments, feedback, like, you know, online or digitally, to just submit that. And so that would definitely be happening, and that would be happening with our tribal partners as well. And then you'll also still always have your ability to do public comment too. Julie, got your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering about the in-person opportunities to hear about the draft language, because back in 2019, when they were finishing up the NRM, or maybe it was 2018, that they did these, but they had community, public, it was separate from NRM. DCYF held these events. We could go, we could sit, we could hear about some of the stuff that was changing. But the person that came to present was just there to collect anything that we wanted to say to them, but they were not in a position where they could respond to our concerns or questions. They were literally just like a note collector, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So for somebody like me that traveled pretty far to go to one that was, you know, because there wasn't one near me, it was frustrating to not be able to have any type of, so I'm wondering if it's going to be a little different this time, because also the comment portal does end up feeling like this black hole of, I spent a lot of time, I wrote a lot of public comment on a lot of different WAC changes, and I don't know if it's going anywhere, or who's reading it, or what's going to come of it.
I can kind of speak to some of that. The Policy and Rules Office are very diligent about collecting and kind of tracking anything that comes into them. All of those comments do come before childcare leadership, and they are all very seriously considered. I know, and Julie, I know what you're talking about back in 2018. Maybe it was like a listening session or a I'm just here to collect your feedback kind of situation. We definitely could do something like that again. if you remember 2018, obviously before COVID, a lot more in-person meetings. And we've been trying our best to offer ways to collect that information and ways to get back to you with the feedback. When it comes right down to it, before any rule goes into effect, you should get an answer back. Like, we considered this and we are moving forward on it. Or we consider this and some other whack covers this right now. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm definitely taking notes that this is needed. This feedback needs to be considered and need to hear
Well,
back.
I think a meeting like this, or if you guys want to do one that just schedule, you know, we're doing a WAC discussion meeting. I find these to be really collaborative, and it feels better than just attending one and not really having the opportunity to discuss. And even hearing from other providers, sometimes they will raise a concern that I hadn't even thought of. And then, you know, like with the exit pathways, I've never heard somebody remark on an exit pathway, just the exit door and the doorway. So I'm like, wow, people are getting in trouble for having, so I think anytime you guys are going to offer something that's collaborative where you can respond to questions in real time, I think that's a good thing.
Duly noted. Taking notes. Thanks.
Yeah, Julie, it's a really good point, and I think that that's something that I always think about in terms of trying to get participation, trying to get comments, because you know, we'll do stuff internally for our staff as well, right? Where we're like, hey, here are all these changes we're going to do. Please provide your comments, your feedback. And people are busy. People have their own stuff to do. Not everybody has time to do stuff. But like, I'm like, we need to like respond to people individually, because what is happening is any feedback we're getting, like we're sitting down and we're having meetings and we're discussing it, and it's the person who get to make those end decisions in terms of DCYF, and get to kind of like, I mean, sometimes we have legal requirements and things that might prohibit it, but those things aren't just being like, aren't disappearing. Like, we're having meaningful conversations around the comments and feedback that we have. And so I don't want you to feel like it's just disappearing into the ether, because we are talking about that stuff and we are trying to figure out what makes sense. Susan, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so this is a perfect example of what, Nicole, when you asked me at what point should providers be interjected into the conversation, Julie, I think, is making the point, we need to be at the table where you are discussing the feedback. If you got the feedback from a group of providers and there were providers at the table while you're discussing it, like Julie sitting there and hearing your discussion, she might be able to clarify any misinterpretations that DCYF staff are making on the feedback, because you don't walk the walk that we have to. It's not your day-to-day lived experience. And so whether it's you know, I don't know whether it's WCCA at the table, but what we don't need is silos where DCYF has their silo and they're discussing the feedback, and we're giving, this is a silo where we might be giving feedback, but we're not hearing the conversation about why the feedback is being interpreted a certain way. So I think, and then I think that's what Julie was getting at with those sessions where there wasn't anybody there who could answer. They were just taking notes. Even people's interpretation are being interjected in those notes. So this is really a great space for childcare providers to be at the table with DCYF when those discussions are happening. So I'm not sure if that was helpful, but these kinds of things keep coming up. And it's really about, instead of siloing the work, bring folks to the table so that we can engage in discussion and conversation and find solutions that actually will work and don't have to go through this testing process of, let's bring it back to provider supports. Let's see what they say, back and forth, back and forth. We could probably eliminate a lot of time and perhaps solve a lot of problems. So thank you for the opportunity to interject here, and thank you, Julie, for raising these points. I think they're really important.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, it's good, really good feedback, and I think it is a good idea to always continue to look at how do we get creative, and how do we do that? How do we have those conversations? And because people do have finite time, and there are a lot of individuals that we want to get their feedback, and to be a part of that. So it's a really great comment. Gloria, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I want to present my concern about these questions. Like the another peer mentioned, if you're going to do some changes or some feedback, ask to providers. Don't ask the people in the community, because the providers, we know what is going on in our programs. Also, you can ask parents who has children in family child care or in centers, but don't ask somebody else who don't have nothing to do with that, because they present their feedback, and sometimes that feedback affects us. Or because one person or two persons didn't comply with something, we have to receive a new changes in the WAC for all the providers, when most of the providers we complying with the WAC. So we buy by the WACs. Like I going to go a little back on the CPR classes and BBP. The BBP training is more focused in hospitals and big industries when they go with a lot of blood, with a lot of machines for incidents. We are family home care in our house or the centers, and there we don't deal with that big incidents, but we had to comply because somebody made a decision to have the BBP every year. When that's going to be nice, and that's we comply with that every 2 years with CPR the same. Because it's an extra thing we have to do, extra thing we have to take a training, what we know what we can do, because we follow the rules with all the requirements, but they is applying to us like we be big hospitals, so we be big enterprises, and we working with children. Also, a lot of providers they're dealing to find the CPR classes in person, because no many providers provide in different languages, and they're dealing with that. And we having hard time with that, and they have hard time with that, but we have to go because somebody changed the rules. And allergies for children, we have to do 2 different formats. Why we don't have to do one? We have the individual plan for some food allergies or some special needs, but also we have to fill it up the special needs rate form. It is in 2 different departments. We have to send one form to Olympia, the special plan, individualized plan, we have to send that to our licensor. Why don't put all together those papers or those formats together, and the forms and documents where it is easy to find and we have access? Because the contradiction in here is requesting a lot of documentation, but we still receiving the same page. If I had a kid who has allergies, if I'm going to do a plan, that means I have to have extra pay because I doing something else more for this special need kid. But it's a lot of requirements, but it's not like paying back. And I want to say only that. And also for the exit emergencies, we have unlocked our exit emergencies. I don't know what we touch in this point. Like we know that we have to have unlocked the 2 exits for emergency. It's like maybe somebody has an idea and presented here, but most of the providers, we are complying. If one provider is not complying, go and talk directly with them and educate, but don't make more changes, because it's affecting to a lot of providers, not only 5 or 10, but always request for feedback to providers, not to somebody else who is nothing to do with our job.
Hey, Gloria, I think that you have so many great points. And I think Anne had kind of touched that they're really trying to, you know, work with us providers more than they have in the past when they do make changes. You brought up a lot of points that had to do with subsidy and not so much the wax, but I think, again, it's just great to hear from another provider such as Gloria that it's really hard in the field. And when you do make changes or you do request to make changes, that as a provider, we just feel left in the dark a lot of times.
And do you know one more thing? We have, I think 2-3 months ago, providers meeting with DCYF, staff from DCYF camp. We present our concerns and they don't listen. They only say, that is the way, we're going by the rules, and that is the way it has to be. And start to receive our feedback, receive our concerns, and make some mediation or agreement, or at least to say, we're going to have a conversation, you're going to come back with answers. But we have like 2 hours in that meeting with no any positive like thing, like we're going to work together. And I think those meetings has to be for that. Receive, ask questions, receive answers, think about the answers and make changes, because we can work together and benefit of the families and the children. We don't want to have problems. We want to have the children safe, because if we have problems, we're going to be with the law. If we can lose our business, like that's why I say we're doing our best we can, but we have to do some agreements with the DCYF staff and work together, not like be an employee and boss, because sometimes it's the way it's happening for us, and we have to have more freedom to speak and present our thought in the safe way and don't have like consequences or retaliation later.
Yeah, we hear you, Gloria. We absolutely understand. I mean, we're so busy. So I think with what Anne and Brett have said is that they're really trying to work with us and understand the in the field part and how hard it is to be a part of this for the change, but yet we're out in the field following wax and keeping our children safe and happy. So thank you, Gloria. Do you guys want to move to the next slide?
It looks like Veronica's hand is up.
Oh, okay.
I just, being that there's going to be some changes, is there a way that we can have licensors or someone up there come and do these trainings, I don't know, once a year or something? Because I know for a fact that not only licensors, but educators or educators that have been in the field that are seasoned see the wax a certain way, and they're doing trainings on the wax and it's not what's on there. So I think it would be very beneficial for many of us to have someone that knows what the wax is. I've advocated for that in the past. And I feel that it would be very beneficial to have that so that we're getting the meat from the pan, and not through all these avenues and then having to correct other educators that have been in the field and are not willing to grow and are stagnant with their thoughts, versus if we have someone from DCYF support us so that we're all getting the information the right way.
Thanks, Veronica. I see 2 hands. Marlene?
Oh, hi. I think there's a couple questions in the chat. I just want to bring them up, and I don't know if they were answered. I apologize. I'm trying to keep up with multiple things, but here, the first one is from Jacqueline about the pathogen certificate. They have to get it annually, and the question was, is there a way to have the same renewal as the first aid, because it can be hard to find the trainings and renew them in a short time frame? And then the other question, I don't know if it was answered, was will new language come to this committee for discussion before it is finalized? I don't know if that one was answered, and if it was, I apologize.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that, like the different ways we're going to bring back these, because this was I mean, this was a request that we got to try to bring some transparency about what things were being worked on. So this stuff, you know, we're working on sort of like, because we've gotten requests from the field, so there'll be more meetings set up. And so yeah, we kind of talked about that. This is just sort of like the dipping the toe in the water on this.
And then it looks like Ursula.
Yeah, hi. I just want to agree with Veronica. I think it's very important that the DCYF, that the trainings that you guys give to the providers came from strictly from the DCYF, from someone that really, really knows what is doing. Because a lot of providers over here in the community, they get confused. For example, the BBP is not a requirement for the DCYF. It's a requirement from the
Labor and
I
Industries,
forgot.
LNI.
Yes, from the LNI. And
Yeah.
a lot of providers that they are doing the trainings, they don't explain the providers. Okay, you have to do the BBP because the labor industries it's asking for that. It's not from the DCYF. I am a CPR trainer, and I always explain the providers. Okay, are you working for a child care? Okay, just let me as a trainer, I have to let my clientele know, you know, this is a requirement from this agency, not from the DCYF. Because a lot of providers they want to take the CPR and they do not take the BBP. They just want to take one and they say, oh no, I have this one. Okay. And I always explain, well, you need to come back next year for the BBP, because this one is required every year. But you can go to the Merit page, and you can see that they put in when you report that you take the BBP, they put like NA, I think, or something like that. Like you don't need it no more, and you do need it. And I want to clarify this, because I have my page from Mary, and I can go in there and I can see that it says that I don't need it no more, you know, but it's a requirement. It is a requirement. And mostly it's us as a providers, if we want to continue working with kids, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves, you know. And it is very important that you guys from the DCYF educate providers and be like very strictly who is educating these providers. Because sometimes and other trainers, you know, I'm not saying all of them, but some trainers, when they are giving a training, they're giving their thoughts, not the training, you know. And it's one thing like I really, really require from the DCYF, because to be very well educated, I need not their thoughts, I need knowledge from that training, you know. And it is very important to take in consideration who is giving that kind of trainings, what kind of trainings or trainers do we have in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Ursula. Thanks for all those thoughts. In the interest of time, if we could just move on. Again, we are just talking about a general what's on the updates, what's coming. So go ahead, Brett.
Okay. Okay, so food sources, the top ones, 0196, aligns compliance with Department of Health Food Service and establishes rules to protect traditional foods used by tribes. So it kind of cleans up the language, and then it allows some kind of exceptions, or makes it more sense for our work with tribes, because they have different sovereignty. The next one is 0215 around medication, and it eliminates the word non-medical. This has been a confusing language piece, and people don't really understand what that means. And then it also clarifies that aerosol sunscreen is prohibited, because I think that wasn't fully written out in the way that would be clear for everybody. And then diaper changing areas, privacy, and disposal. It eliminates the statement about leaving a child unattended while changing the diaper, mainly because this is already covered in 110-300-0345 in supervising children. And so we don't want licensors to be double citing this. It's a confusing reality that's already kind of covered in supervision. So, if you're leaving a child up on a changing table and you walk off and you're gone, there's an ability to just cite that with supervision and not need to have it covered for both these areas.
Thanks, Brett. I'll be going over the next slide if you'll go on, please. Again, just to remind everyone, we do not have the wording set in stone for this at all. This is what was requested, that we just give you an idea about what's on the horizon. So you will have plenty of opportunity, and I hope I speak for Travis and Debbie when I say we want to hear your input and feedback. It's not ready to go yet. It's just the beginning. So, but these are the categories, and this is what you asked for, the list. There's a number missing there. It should be 0260, storage of hazardous and maintenance supplies. There's already wording in the WAC that says keep it inaccessible. So then we don't need this locked doors. This is one way we're trying to streamline things a little bit, eliminate the requirement for locked doors. If these hazardous materials are already inaccessible, they don't need to be locked. 0345, supervising children, in all three of our WAC chapters. Clarifies supervision requirement to not allow children in unlicensed space during business hours. And it also clarifies what those other activities are allowed for temporary time periods. If you're familiar with this one at all, it would be items like when it's napping time and there's a child, children are sleeping, but perhaps the supervising teacher is listening from another room and cleaning something. That's the supervising category that we're talking about here. 0400 application materials. This allows an exception for retaking orientation if you've already taken it and you've continuously worked in childcare. Another part of 0400 application materials clarifies the smelter plume requirement. I think our wording says Tacoma smelter plume, and if you are all aware, it's not just Tacoma area that could have smelter plume ramifications. So we're clarifying that providers who are looking to meet these requirements, we would require you to get in touch with Department of Ecology on their website, a real easy dirt alert website that you can check to see whether your facility is located on any of those smelter areas. Julie.
Okay, yeah, I have a question about the supervising children WAC change. Several years ago, I was part of a group that we submitted a petition specifically about nap time and allowing the second person in the classroom to step out and do other activities, such as they might go to the office and make copies, or they might run downstairs, to another space and grab gallons of paint so they could fill up the paint bottles, as long as there was, a teacher in the classroom while the kids were sleeping. And the reply that we got back was that all the activities that we were talking about and having the second person be allowed to step out of the classroom while the kids are napping was already allowed under this WAC. So I'm very interested in hearing more specifically about that. I don't want to have to file another petition. So I'm like, now I'm like, which way is it going to go? Is it still going to be allowed? Or is that going to be so specific when it says clarifies staff under, you're going to provide more information about what that means, undertaking under other activities. Right now, it does allow. So, yeah.
Right. So, I don't have the wording in front of me. You will be allowed to give input on however that wording is revised.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I saw a question pop up in chat. But in the interest of time, if it's okay with y'all, we will just make sure that all the questions get sent to us, to Brett and I, Jessica, or whoever is running the slideshow. I know there's a way to capture everything in the chat. If you could just capture those comments and send them to Brett and I after this, we will definitely, thank you, Marlene. Perfect.
And just real quickly, I mean, Juliet said she's surprised about the leaving a child unattended on a changing table and that she disagrees with that change. So I have that written down. And then there was another comment about strongly disagreeing with this change, which I'm thinking is the same thing. And it's crucial to maintain clear guidelines and prioritize child safety. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple notes there. And I think maybe the issue there was that people were getting double-sided or staff were getting confused what to cite, whether it was supervision or diaper changing or both. So that was kind of the intent behind that, but we can relook at that potentially.
Thanks, Brett. This is the last slide with the changes noted. 0410, licensing and program location. Here is that smelter plume requirement again. Previously, we had listed Tacoma smelter plume. There are many areas in the state that are identified by the Department of Ecology. And so you would have to contact them and make sure that you check out that those facilities are not located in an area where the dirt is polluted. 0415 is zoning codes and ordinances. This one clarifies that before a program is licensed, that they would check their local ordinances, zoning codes and ordinances, both before they're licensed and then while they're licensed. So, for example, if you wanted to make a change to your family home and convert a part of your home to serve the childcare, make sure that while you're licensed, you check with your local ordinances on that. 0425, this provides clarification for us and providers on maintaining open licenses that do not provide care for extended periods of time. We are finding that some licenses are issued, and when childcare provider licensors go out to do their monitor visits, or even to renew or continue their non-expiring license, but they can't find the provider at home. They can't find children in care. Perhaps there are, it's a situation where it's a brand new provider who is unable to enroll, but part of our WAC requires the licensing staff to observe the childcare provider interacting with children. It's real hard to do if there's no kids enrolled and no kids present. So something for that to be clarified. And then this last one, again, 0465, this has to do with facility and program records, just making sure that those inspection records are available if you are in a smelter plume area. Next slide, please. So I mentioned it a couple times, but I just want to reiterate, these these revisions are not ready to go. This is the very beginning of this process. We are going to be connecting with our tribal partners for their input. We are working with our Policy and Rules Office, the DCYF level. We will be scheduling webinars for negotiated rulemaking process, gathering input from all kinds of stakeholders, absolutely with you all. I put this date in here no earlier than January 2025. I actually think it will be well into 2025 by the time anything with these are ready to go. And collecting your questions from this audience already, we see that you have a lot of good questions, a lot of good concerns. And I just put no earlier than, but in actual timeline with changing WACs, it is a long process. So the last slide gives Brett and my contact information. You are welcome to send it directly to us. You could always send questions and comments to our Policy and Rules Office. I don't have that web address or their inbox just at hand here, but please feel free to reach out to us. You will get follow-up from this meeting, and I know you have the slide deck, but really what we wanted to address you with today was, here's what we're thinking. These are the beginning stages. Here's the categories. So I hope we didn't raise any alarm. We just want to be transparent and let you know these are the subsections, the categories within the 3 WAC chapters, and you will be hearing much more.
Thank you, guys. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
Well, I was just gonna say, there was a question on licensing orientation being required when someone is opening an additional center. I've heard some people have to retake that, and then I had to retake that even though I was running a current center for 20 years. Yeah, that does seem funny, and I'm not that I've captured that question because that does seem strange. So thank you for providing that, and thank you everybody who wrote in and brought questions forward. Really valid, and just wanted to say thank you for speaking up and us continuing to try to iterate and do better as we move forward.
Yes, as a provider, I can really say thank you. And I'm sure a lot of the other providers on here and providers that we'll talk to after the meeting will really appreciate that. Because there's just been a lot of discrepancy, and again, us in the dark and not knowing what happens when there's rule changes and how long it takes. So today was very informative, and it was nice to see a list of some of the ones that you guys are working on. So thank you for your time, and have a great day. Shall we move on to the next one? Oh, we have the mentee, that's right. If you guys can go on and answer the question, do you have any additional questions or feedback to share with DCYF regarding this topic? So rule changing, the WACs. Please fill this out, because this is truly where a lot of information will filter into, the next meeting, and just the feedback is so important.
And the link to that mentee is in the chat.
All right, Dave, are you ready to go for the next?
Absolutely. So thank you, Ann and Brett. And we are going to transition and bring in DCYF Senior Policy Advisor Melissa Cheeseman to provide an update on early learning decision packages. It's going to be for the next about 45 minutes, and then just to keep you up to date on the agenda, we will have a break then from 11:30 till 11:45. And after Melissa is done, we will also have another mentee reflection time. So please be prepared for that as well. But just want to introduce Melissa again and thank her for being with us today as we learn about where we're at with the legislative package. Melissa?
All right, beautiful morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Again, Melissa Cheeseman, am the Early Learning and Care Government Affairs Senior Policy Advisor. I work in the Office of Public Affairs here at the Department of Children, Youth, Children, Youth and Families, or DCYF. I will be presenting today's related early learning and care decision packages that are moving forward through DCYF's development process. Also in attendance, as you all saw a presentation before from Nicole Rose, the Assistant Secretary of the Early Learning Division, as well as Courtney Parker, is our newest addition to the Government Affairs team. She's a policy advisor supporting the Early Learning and Care portfolio. She started back in July of this year and comes to us with provider experience, as well as a breadth of other skill sets. And I just want to take a moment to welcome Courtney and hope that you all do the same. This presentation should be interactive, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat, stop me, whatever it is. If we can't answer it today, I will work with Erin and Marlene to get responses through the feedback loop. My goal in presenting today is to provide information on the related decision packages. And then, of course, after each slide, open the floor for discussion, questions, comments. While doing this, I will be taking notes, particularly on questions that need to come back, as well as feedback on the specific decision packages. When giving feedback on the decision packages, if you're feeling it and if it's possible, if you could say if you support, oppose, or uncertain. Again, not a requirement. If I do ask a follow-up question, it's just so that I fully understand and I'm making sure that I'm taking notes that is summarizing your thoughts. At the end of the presentation, you'll be provided with another opportunity to ask questions or thoughts. I will also be providing my email, which is also included in the presentation. So if after this meeting you have a thought, a comment, a question, please feel free to contact me anytime. Before moving on, the agenda for today's presentation is an overview of DCYF's legislative planning process, timelines, realities, and DCYF's authorizing authority. And then I will provide information on DCYF's related early learning and care decision packages. Any questions about anything I just said, the agenda, before we move on? All right, so I have the everything minimized because I have a couple of different documents open, particularly for taking notes. So just unmute yourself. There's no need to raise hands. One other thing I want to say is that this presentation has been accompanied by a handout that includes all the acronyms that you're going to see. If you have any questions on those acronyms, please let me know. I'm more than happy to get you more information. Okay, so I see that we're on the next slide. So let's get this party started. For folks who have participated in presentations like this before, this should look really familiar. Okay, talk slower. All right, I got it. Thank you for the feedback. So for folks, like I said, this slide should look really familiar. I want to direct everyone to the top left of the slide. What you're going to see is a reddish orange circle around May through September. This is where we currently are in our annual cycle. This is when DCYF budget, program, and policy staff are collaborating and working on developing decision package proposals for additional funding and any related needed agency request legislation. And so sometimes, and I'm just going to take a moment, sometimes when we are asking for additional funding, there's some type of law that needs to be changed. And that's essentially what an agency request legislation, when it's combined with a DP, would look like. And so for DCYF's early learning and care funding asked for this next biennium, they are grounded in funding policies that are already in statute or law, I'm going to try to speak slower, sorry, and or to comply with federal requirements. These asks are also fundamentally grounded in DCYF's mission, which is to protect children and strengthen families so that they flourish. This is also when policy and program staff work on developing, as I mentioned, agency request legislation, which will need to be reviewed by the Code Revisor's Office before being submitted to the Office of Financial Management, along with the related decision packages within this timeframe. Additionally, like last year, the agency request legislation development here at DCYF is going to be very limited and targeted. And this year, the early learning and care portfolios does not include agency request legislation. All DCYF's proposals are currently going through the final development process before final submission in mid-September to the Office of Financial Management. This means that concepts and proposals that aren't at a certain level of completion, for whatever reason, have been removed from this development process for this current cycle. Next slide, please. So this slide provides just a little bit more granular detail than the prior slide about the cycle, our development cycle. Specifically want to draw everyone's attention to the far right slide this time around the month of August, which is where we currently are, and it's marked by a dashed orange circle. This is where we currently are in the process. Just to recap, at the end of June, DCYF leadership met to decide which decision packages and agency request legislation to move forward to full development, taking the proposed concepts and creating the actual decision packages and agency request proposals. During July, budget and program staff were refining and finalizing budget estimates and supporting narratives for this actual DP or decision package proposals. More recently, DCYF budget and policy staff were reviewing those narratives and estimates and have completed the review of those decision packages and are now being reviewed by leadership. This is also the time when DCYF is continuing to reach out and engage with partners like all of you to collect feedback on DCYF's refined proposals. Next slide, please. And so I think this is my last process slide, I promise, I think. So this slide provides just a little more detail than the last two slides, particularly about where we're at in August. And as I mentioned right now, and it's highlighted in yellow, we're finalizing decision packages and agency requests for legislation with the goal of completing by mid to late August for final submission, like I said earlier, to the Office of Financial Management in mid-September. Next slide, please. All right, so before going over some realities that can impact the legislative process, which includes DCYF, what DCYF would be allowed to request in the 2024 and 27 biennium budget, it is important for me to first provide some information on DCYF's authorizing environment. Up until now, this presentation is primarily focused on DCYF's internal planning process and development process. Now I'd like to provide more information about DCYF's authorizing environment. As we've been developing decision packages, DCYF staff has been working with the Office of Financial Management for guidance and feedback on issues and concepts and incorporate that feedback from OFM, the Office of Financial Management, into DCYF's ask prior to submitting our proposals in September. Once those proposals are submitted in September, the Office of Financial Management will review DCYF's proposals in their entirety. They will advise and then also collect additional information. Then the governor's office works through those proposals, decides which and to what extent proposals are included in the governor's budget. Once completed, the governor's budget is then published on OFM's website or the Office of Financial Management's website. I think something that's really noteworthy, very different this time, because this is an election year, and that's not necessarily different. This is an election year that includes the election of a new governor. That new governor and their transition team will build a proposed budget. We anticipate working with the incoming governor and their transition team in November and December on their budget build as well. So at this time, we're estimating that budget would be published probably sometime in January. With this all being said, the governor's proposed budget becomes our agency's playbook for session. And what does that mean? That means we can't advocate or do anything beyond what the governor's budget says. And so with that being said, processes may look a little different leading up to the ledge session because of the elections in November. But our authorizing environment is still defined by the governor's proposed budget. And of course, our spending authority defined by the legislature once that legislation has been enacted. Any questions about that before I move on to realities that impact the budget and what gets considered? All right, if you ever have any questions, please go ahead and let me know. We're still on the prior slide. So now turning to the actual realities that can shape what gets included in the budget and what is considered by the legislature when moving bills forward. For some quick background, our state operates on a biennium, which means on odd years like 2025 next year, and what we're all preparing decision packages for. The legislature's regular session is long, lasting 105 days. During the odd year, the legislature must decide on a biennium budget, a 2-year budget that authorizes state government spending. Leading up to the next 2-year budget, there are some realities that will impact what is included and considered. I think the first important reality, and this was already mentioned a couple of different times, DCYF is still continuing to implement significant policy changes and investments across DCYF's entire portfolio and across its entire agency. Additionally, policy direction is driven by our elected officials. And this November, we'll be voting for half our representatives, or I'm sorry, all of our representatives and half our senators, and for the first time in 12 years, a new governor. This new administration could have different priorities that will impact the budget and policy priorities into the next session and the perceivable future. As it relates to economic outlooks, declining revenues, forecasts indicate a possible economic slowdown. This slowdown can lead to more conservative decisions on how much and where to invest when thinking about the budget. And as a lot of you already know, there are several ballot initiatives that can impact future state revenues that fund a lot of programs, including programs here at DCYF. For example, there's uncertainty related to the revenue that the state is currently collecting for the capital gains tax, which we know we do get direct funding from. And then another ballot initiative around revenues that are collected through the cap and trade auction revenues from the Climate Commitment Act. And the reason why I bring this one up as well is because less revenue to the state means that there's less money to spend on programs. And so while the Climate Commitment Act doesn't necessarily direct funds to the early learning programs, like I said, less money means that there's less to allocate to different state programs. Any questions before we move on? I'm just checking the chat. All right, seeing that we're already on the next slide, just kind of go over this real quickly. When also thinking about grounding our DPs and before presenting the decision packages, I want to just quickly talk about our DPs in relation to the early learning strategic program priorities and outcomes. These include supporting 80% of Washington children ready for kindergarten. High quality childcare is available and affordable to all in Washington. Prevention goals connected to early learning as a strategy for keeping children safe. And of course, eliminate racial disproportionality and advance racial justice, or equity, I should say. I see in the comments from Julie, I thought we were spending our time going over specific bills today. Bills. So that ledge session is currently not in session. Ledge session generally starts the second week of January. So there's no bills to review at this time. And Like, as I mentioned earlier before, Julie, there are no agency request legislation associated with early learning and care. Is there something specific that you were looking for in this presentation? Okay, so that's a decision package, and I will be presenting that in just a moment. Any other questions or thoughts before moving on? All right. So thank you for moving to the next slide. So here's a list of the early learning and care decision packages that I'll be presenting next. What I want to mention here is that, as I mentioned before, our funding asks are to meet statute obligation or laws that are already currently on the books for ECAP entitlement, working connections childcare, income eligibility expansion to 75% state median income, setting base rates at the 85th percentile of market rates. Additionally, there have been changes to the CCDF rules or the Child Care and Development Fund rules that require additional funding in order to implement and to stay within compliance. Separate from all of that, and as indicated by Julie in the comments, we are also working on requesting funding to create a child care complaint unit. This proposal is geared towards improved licensing and compliance support for providers through program improvements and expansion. These VPs contribute to Washington, supporting Washington developing a mixed delivery childcare system where families are able to choose from a continuum of early learning options that meet their needs, so that children are supported in ways needed for healthy development starting at birth, and providers are supported in a way that leads towards positive outcomes for both business and the workforce. Next slide, please. All right, ECAP entitlements. This proposal adds approximately, or it adds about 6,515 ECAP slots to reach entitlement by 2026-27 school year. This request also includes funding for converting part day slots to school day slots primarily, and then to a lesser extent, working day slots, slot rate increases, as well as quality supports and provider scholarships. Specific to converting slots, this proposal seeks to increase the dosage or length of day to meet entitlement ECAP entitlement to support kindergarten readiness by converting the 716 part day slots. And like I said, the majority of that is going to be school day with a smaller number to working day slots. This request also seeks to increase the rates to better cover provider costs using the school day and working day models. The request seeks an approximate 29% rate increase from current levels. DCYF is also seeking additional funding for maintaining adequate levels of quality supports that provides curriculum and ongoing assessments for classrooms and children. Finally, this ask requests authority and funding to provide scholarships for an increased early learning workforce and to expand support for early achievers based on that estimated workforce growth. As far as budget, as far as budget asks, okay, I'm sorry. Yes?
Oh, I thought you were done with that slide. I was just going to mention two things before we moved on to the next slide.
Oh, okay, no problem. So as far as budget asks, DCYF is specifically asking for $456.2 million over the next biennium. And this includes also 25.5 FTE equivalent staff members. Any thoughts, questions?
We do have a hand raised, and then we also just have a request from our interpreters just to move just a bit slower if possible, just for the quality of the interpretation. And then we also have Marlene with her hand raised as well.
All right.
That's what I was going to say. The interpreters are messaging us to just slow it down a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I apologize. Part of speaking fast is also cultural. So I will do a more, what's the word? I'll try to be more intentional.
Thank you, Melissa. And I think outside of that, we are clear in the chat at the moment, unless there's anyone that wants to unmute and ask a question. All right, I think we are good to
Sorry,
continue.
Dave, I got to the mute too
Oh,
slow.
sorry, Susan, go ahead.
The 25 point something FTEs, is that all for the complaint unit?
Susan, that is specifically for meeting ECAP entitlement.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
That slide's coming up in a little bit. I think we're just going one by one now through the different packages.
Correct. With the goal that that if there's conversation to have on these, you know, right, having them with the information in front of us is oftentimes helpful. At least I find it helpful. But yes, but yeah, no, if you have that, the 25.5 is not in relation to the compliance unit, the complaint unit. The complaint unit, I believe, is 20, but it's pretty similar. So.
All right, and then Sandra had her hand up as well.
Thank you. Melissa, refresh my memory. Does any funding come from the federal government for our ECAP program?
I am writing this question down specifically because I want to make sure that whatever I say provides provides an accurate answer. So I will work with budget on finding, does any federal funding fund this work? Is that correct?
Yes, that's my question.
Thank you, Sandra.
And I definitely want to say yes, but also I want to make sure I get you a complete answer. So thank you, Sandra.
All right, any other questions about this specific topic before we move on to the next? All right, Melissa, I think after you have that question jotted down, I think you are okay to move forward.
Just real quickly, Sandra, I wanted to ask, when you're talking about federal funding, as I'm typing this, I just want to make sure, are we just talking about the addition, like to meet entitlement, or do you just mean funding ECAP in general?
To meet entitlement.
Thank you. All right, so next slide, please, if there's no other questions.
We're good for now.
Awesome. Okay. So this next slide is the decision package request to increase Working Connections childcare eligibility to 75% state median income beginning July 2025, as required under RCW 43.216.802, and I've dropped that in the chat. I think, and the reason why I want to make sure I'm pointing you all to this is because in the last leg session, House Bill 2111 was a reorganization of the provisions around Working Connections childcare, and they have now been recodified within Title 43 in the 800 section. Under chapter 216. So I'm just dropping that in the chat so that everyone sees that location. So again, this DP is about meeting in the 75% state median income eligibility by beginning July 2025. Additionally, DCYF is asking requesting additional funding to increase the dual language rate to adjust for inflation as required by RCW 43.216.775. And this also was a requirement added after the last leg session that made this mandatory, so without appropriation. So if DCYF doesn't ask for this funding, essentially, we have to provide this increased rate, whether or not we get the funding. So it's definitely in the ask. So that we can pay for the that increased rate. Specific to Working Connections childcare eligibility expansion to 75% state median income. Access to Working Connections childcare would expand to approximately 8,000 families, which is about 13,500 additional children. The Child Care and Development Fund program rules require establishing a new copay tier between the 75 and 85% state median income at no more than 7% of a family's income. DCYF in this decision package proposes the establishment of a second tier or 80% state median income, which will result in a max copay of $350 per month, or approximately 6.8% of the gross of a family's gross monthly income. And the copays have been recodified in RCW 43.216.804. I've just dropped that in the chat as well. Additionally, this second tier eligibility, again, to 80% state median income, allows families to have some income growth and retain childcare at reapplication. The request also seeks additional funding specifically for outreach and support for Working Connections childcare eligible families. Finally, like I said before, DCYF is asking specifically for additional funding to increase the dual language rate using the implicit price deflator. Specific to this budget ask, DCYF is requesting $268.1 million in additional annual revenue or in additional annual funding over the next biennium. This also funds an additional 40 full-time equivalent staff members. Any questions, thoughts?
Yeah, we have
comments?
Susan with her hand raised. Go ahead, Susan.
Awesome.
Yeah, with regard to the income eligibility thing going up to the 75% of the state median income, is that 75% a fixed point in time, or is it, like, does it change every year? Which median income, I mean, like how with market rate survey right now, we're being reimbursed at 2021 rates or something like that. So I was curious about what point in time is that 75% based on?
Yeah, and Melissa, I'm happy to take that question if you would like.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Susan. And we do update the state median income annually. And I believe this year that's around October. And then that's we have that listed on our copay charts and eligibility charts. And then it gets updated again, really when we get that information coming out. When we used to use federal poverty level, when it was coming out from the Fed. So we do have a timeline on which we update it annually.
Okay, thanks. So I'm glad to hear that it's updated annually. Thank you.
Yes.
Right, Melissa, that's currently the only hand raised or question that chat at this moment. Anybody else have anything before we move on to the next section? Okay, I think you are good to continue on.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so for base rates, Washington has a long history of investing in quality and access. Washington has built a strong foundation of quality and diversity in early learning and education in the education system. DCYF is required, and I'm going to drop this in the chat too, by RCW 43.216.828, because that has been recodified. There we go. To recommend base rates to the legislature to achieve the 85th percentile of market rates. Parallel to that work, DCYF has also been working and developing a cost model to produce rates that compensate licensed and certified providers at the full cost of quality care. At this time, DCYF will be recommending base rates on the 2024 market rates survey in the next biennium based on guidance provided by the Office of Financial Management. The proposed recommendation seeks to set, like I said, at the 85th percentile, seeks to set base rates at the 85th percentile. And I went ahead and dropped that that study in the chat. It also includes information on both the market rates survey as well as the cost of quality care study.
Melissa, just before you move on, Lois had just asked a question. Could you please repeat your opening statement to this section again? I don't think that she caught your lead in.
Absolutely. So for base weight rates.
No, I'm sorry, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. No, could you go back? You had mentioned something at the beginning before, and I don't know if you were just talking off the cuff or if you're reading your notes, because I know sometimes it's helpful. You had made a comment about DCYF has built a robust, diverse early learning system. I just want to make sure I heard that correct.
I said
Or
Washington has built a strong foundation of quality and diversity in its early learning and education system.
Okay, so I would like to know, and this is separate, is just what that data is based on, nothing that I know you can answer right now, and especially what you're considering diverse, to share that statement out. So just want some clarity on that, because I think it depends upon who you talk to, whether or not we have the facts to back that up. So I would love to know, and you can share that out maybe in the feedback loop, what substantiates that statement.
So Louis, I'm not necessarily sure I'm speaking from data, considering, you know, OFM is, or the Office of Financial Management generally is the keeper of keys of state data. But when I talk about Washington, I mean the legislature and the decisions that they've made and the investments that they've made.
Okay.
And I can qualify that next time as saying the Washington legislature.
Yeah, that would be great, but it still would be good to have the data that backs up that statement about how robust that investment is, and if that is, quite frankly, if that's accurate or not.
Okay, so let me see. I'm just, let me get this all typed up and then I'll paraphrase it back. So, would like data and or information that supports this statement. And the statement is, Washington's legislature has built a strong foundation of quality and diversity in its early learning and education system.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Awesome. Got it. I've got it down, Lois.
Thanks, Lois. And then also just a quick,
Dave.
Oh yeah, no problem. And then just a quick comment as well from Jacqueline, and Marlene was kind enough to translate. It's just as I'm also happy to see that it is now happens annually, repayments. It helps a lot of families and to us in our work, because many families left the field because they were not given the option of a co-payment. So just wanted to be caught up there in the chat, and thank you, Jacqueline, for your comment as well. All right, Melissa, I think we're caught up.
Awesome. Okay. So I was going to now talk about essentially a comparison. It's so the proposed increases at the 85th percentile that we're recommending to be effective July 2025 would essentially be an average of a 27% increase in rates across the state. When comparing those rates at, like I said, the 85th percentile of market rates with rates from the cost of quality care, Essentially, DCYF's rate proposal using current subsidy regions would achieve approximately, for infants, 62% of the cost of quality care. For toddlers, 73%. Preschool age children, 75%, and for school age children, 95% of the cost of quality care. This funding would also support approximately 30,000 families or 51,000 children initially. The number of providers and families will continue to increase as subsidy eligibility expands both in July 2025 and again in July 2027. And that's when the 85th percentile is scheduled to, the expansion for income eligibility is scheduled. And approximately 1,600 licensed centers and 2,400 licensed family home providers could receive a rate increase in the next biennium. So specific to this budget ask, DCYF is asking for an additional $2.983 million over the next biennium, specifically to fund base rates. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? All right. The next slide is specific to the Child Care and Development Fund. So effective, as a lot of you already know, effective April 30th, 2024, the Child Care and Development Fund provided new program requirements that DCYF must comply with. These changes seek to expand access, availability, and affordability of child care subsidy benefits to eligible children and families. While the federal government has provided some funding to support this work, it is not nearly enough to fund the cost of compliance. That is why DCYF is requesting additional funding to implement the following new requirements. And without this funding, DCYF will not be able to comply. So specifically, pay providers based on enrollment instead of attendance. Additionally, DCYF must pay prospectively rather than retrospectively, or in other words, in advance of care rather than after care is provided. And this is really in alignment with the way that families pay for care as well. Provide early childhood education services through grants and contracts for underserved geographic areas, infants and toddlers and children with disabilities. And then finally, allow for a full 12 months of authorization when a new child is added to a household during an established authorization period. Specific to this budget ask, DCYF is asking for an additional $94.9 million over the next biennium to comply with CCDF rules. And it also includes 4.0 full-time funding for 4.0 for full-time equivalent staff members. Any questions, thoughts?
We have Julie with her hand raised.
Thank you. I actually have a question that probably goes to Nicole around this subsidy thing where they would pay before rather than after. That's a wonderful thing, I think, because it does align with how private pay families. But I'm wondering what that will mean for, has there been any discussion about what that will mean if a family decides to leave, or they just disappear after, I don't know, 5 days into the month? Typically we can bill for the whole month. And I'm wondering if there's going to be any change to that, especially if they enroll in another center and apply for subsidy elsewhere.
Yeah, Julie, you are asking all of the right questions, and it's something that I would actually like to bring Jason back to this group and come back and talk about enrollment-based payment and prospective payment. And I think sort of talk with you all about what are the questions and wonderings you have, just like those scenarios, as we work to build this out, so we can do a little bit of, I think, co-creation there. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I just don't want more audits. Nobody wants audits.
Yeah, and I don't have the answer to that right now. And
okay,
we know we need to talk through all of those things.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
We have Sandra with a question as well.
Thank you, Dave. Just a caveat. Currently, we have to jump through hoops, crawl under bridges, and go through troll-infested lands to try to request payment for our children with disabilities. And I hope that as you look at this decision package and kind of set up the guidelines and goals that you think about that to make it a little easier on providers to access that money.
Thank you, Sandra, for that. We have had a lot of requests about special needs, and that wouldn't be part of this decision package, but it is something that we are thinking about. So thank you for flagging that again.
All right, Melissa, I think we're ready to move on.
Right. All right. Just taking notes. Okay, so next slide, please. So this is my last slide on decision packages today. So DCYF is requesting additional funding for 20 full-time equivalent employees to create a child care complaint unit. This practice change and expansion of workforce will streamline investigative processes, streamline workload and systems, and create consistent practice and improve provider experiences. This will improve the quality and intention of our licensing practice, improve quality and availability of provider services, and align with division and program goals. DCYF's childcare licensing uses a progressive enforcement strategy, emphasizing the use of technical assistance as the first line of provider supports. Licensors are also responsible for monitoring compliance while also inspecting licensing complaints. The compliance and complaint workload activities limit licensors' ability and opportunity to provide adequate and culturally responsive technical assistance to providers. This proposal creates a licensing complaint unit separate from the compliance monitoring work to address licensing complexities and the ability to serve all licensed providers statewide equitably, maintain equitable licensor workloads, provide separation of duty that reduces the risk of bias and conflicts of interest in the process, and then enable staff to meet timelines and support licensed providers holistically. This budget ask requests an additional $5.5 million over the next biennium, which again, like I said before, includes 20 full-time equivalent staff members. Any questions, thoughts?
We have two hands raised. Let's go to Sandra first and then Hoden. Sandra,
Sorry, Dave, I forgot to lower my hand. Yeah.
You're good.
Okay.
Oh, that was from before. Okay,
Right.
hold on. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is a lot of information, so really having a hard time trying to get feedbacks, but I was just curious about CPS. What I've learned and I've seen, you know, for the last years and so, DCYF is in-house with the CPS investigator team. They also provide license to centers, so everything is in within DCYF. So I'm just wondering, since you said something about reducing potential of conflicts of interest, it's really hard to, you know, to separate between everyone that who's doing all this investigation, the work, and is all umbrella on DCYF. Would it be more helpful to maybe have a third party oversee the CPS investigation and etc., so that you can really actually reduce a conflict of interest, since everyone is working for DCYF and everything is coming under you guys? And in my understanding, in my opinion, things has not been improving So I was just wondering, so now that you're establishing new compliance, would that be realistic of reaching out to a third party to oversee this part? Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go to Nicole first, and then we can.
Yeah,
And
go
then
back to-
just really quickly, my statement specifically about conflict of interest is related to separation of duty. So a common business practice to reduce bias and risk within systems within an organization are like a common practice is a separation of duty. I'm writing down that your comment is really specifically about wanting a third party to review complaints.
Yeah,
and the rationale, just real quick, I want to make sure I get Hoden's comments down as a rationale, right, for conflict, for minimizing conflict of interest.
Nicole, I think you're good to.
Yeah, so I want to I just want to add a little bit more on this just to talk about it. So right now in our licensing division, we have our child care licensors and our foster care licensors, and then we have our CPS or SAM unit. And so in foster care, licensors do not do complaint investigations. There's a whole separate unit that does that. And what we're really trying to do is take a look at that model, which we think has been successful because the licensors can then focus in on the licensing pieces. I think it takes away from my licensor is also coming out to do a complaint investigation, and there's a whole separate complaint unit. And we think that this will be really beneficial for providers in early learning because right now we have 85 licensors across the state who are doing technical assistance, regulation, and they're also doing complaint investigation. And I feel like we've really heard from you all in these meetings that it would be beneficial to have that complaint investigation be separated out from the licensor's duty. And I think what it really does, it allows the licensors to focus in on that technical assistance that they're really wanting to provide as they go out and do monitoring visits. So that's what we see as the benefit to providers, is that licensors may end up having a bit more time. Although I'm not Ruben, I want to be really clear about that, who oversees that unit. But I think, one of the benefits is licensors can really focus in on the licensing piece, and there's someone else who's coming in and working through the complaint pieces.
Thanks, Nicole. Then we have Julie, and I know Lois had her hand up as well, so I just want to make sure that we had that covered. Julie, you want to go ahead?
Nope, I'm good. I just wanted to ask Nicole some questions, and she's already gone there. Thank you, Nicole.
Cool. Lois, did you still have a question, or was that from a previous
No,
spot?
actually, Nicole answered my questions as well. So
Wonderful.
Thank you, Nicole.
I think, Melissa, we're in a spot to wrap up if you are, if there's any other questions on this one.
There isn't, well, you're not asking me, we're asking other people, is there questions?
Yeah, I don't see any other hand raised or things in the chat, so I think you are good to wrap up.
All right, well, I mean, if there are no other questions, comments, thoughts that you all would want to share, my email is in the presentation. I'm also going to drop it in the chat. Please reach out to me anytime, and thank you for having me here, and we'll probably see you before too long anyway, at least for the updates from the governor's budget.
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate your time with us today. We are now going to take a 10 to 12-ish minute break. And during that time, our Menti is up for additional questions or feedback to share with DCYF regarding this topic. Jessica was kind enough to put that link in the chat. When we come back at around 11:45, Julie will introduce Kelsey and Melinda, who will be talking to us about the Complex Needs Fund updates and feedback. So enjoy your break, get a nice stretch, something to eat or drink, and we will see you back here in about 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next section, although there is a survey link in the chat for the last topic. If you click on the Survey Monkey, I believe it leads you to basically all the topics, and you can click through and provide feedback for the previous topic as well as earlier topics. So we're going to move on to the Complex Needs Fund. It looks like both of our presenters are here. So we've got DCYF's Child Care Grants Manager, Kelsey Boyce, and Child Care Grants Coordinator, Melinda Waite, and they are here to gather feedback on the Complex Needs Fund. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Julie, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. Like Julie said, I'm Kelsey Boyce, and presenting with me today is Melinda Waite, who coordinates the Child Care Complex Needs Fund. If we can move on to the next slide, I'll give an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Thank you. Okay, so I'll start with just an overview of what we're presenting on today. We'll briefly go over the available funding for the Complex Needs Funds in the 2023 to 25 biennium that we're in right now, and then beyond. We'll take a high-level look at the Complex Needs Funds awarded both for ECAP and childcare in this biennium. And then I'll pass it over to Melinda, and we'll take a closer look at each of those funding opportunities, just to provide updates on where we're at with those for the ECAP Complex Needs Fund and the Childcare Complex Needs Fund. We'll share a little bit about the technical assistance that's available to providers. And then Melinda will pass it back to me, and we'll transition to a discussion around refinement for these opportunities. Would like to talk to you a little bit about some things that we've heard and learned, and to get your feedback on ways to move forward with that. We'll pause a few times throughout the presentation for questions, and I'll attempt to monitor the chat as well. But if there are any questions that we don't get to today or that we're not able to answer immediately, I'm hoping Erin and Marlene can capture those questions, and then we'll be able to follow up on them afterwards as well. We can move on to the next slide. So apologies for the large block of text on this slide, but I just want to briefly go over where we're at right now with the funding we have available for the Complex Needs Fund in 2023 to 25 biennium, and then a little bit about what's after that. So for the ECAP Complex Needs Fund in the current biennium, we received a one-time increase in funding from the legislature. And this one-time increase was $5.7 million. And that increase is on top of the regular maintenance funding we have for each fiscal year in this biennium, which is $4.6 million. So, and that also includes DCYF staffing for coordination. So the total amount of ECAP Complex Needs funding for 23 to 25 biennium is $7.1 million for FY fiscal year, for fiscal year 2024, and $7.9 million for fiscal year 2025, totaling $15 million. For the Child Care Complex Needs Fund, the legislature in this biennium increased the maintenance level funding by about $15.396 million. So that means that instead of a one-time increase, it increased the dollar amount that's available ongoing each fiscal year. And so the total amount for Child Care Complex Needs Fund for this 2023 to 2025 biennium is about $19.8 million. Pausing just because that's a lot to digest, sorry. For the next biennium, that 2025 to 27 biennium, we have the amount of ongoing funding for the ECAP Complex Needs Fund is $9.2 million. So that's back to that $4.6 million per fiscal year. And the total amount of ongoing funding for the Child Care Complex Needs Fund is $19.8 million. So that's that $9.9 million each fiscal year. Any additional budget information for the 25 through 27 biennium would be determined by the legislative session in 2025. So that's what we know now about the budget that we have for this grant. If we can move on to the next slide. This is just that high level look of what's happened this year. So we were able to award 9.9 million in childcare complex needs funds this year in fiscal year 2024. So this previous fiscal year. And we were able to award 7.8 million in ECAP complex needs funds for fiscal year 25, but that was awarded in this year. So they're slightly offset, but we were able to award 17.7 million in both of these combined complex needs funds this year. And I think that's really exciting to see how those dollars are going out and supporting providers and the children that they serve. If we can move on to the next slide. This is a look at where we're at in this biennium so far. So the table shows the ECAP complex needs fund and the childcare complex needs fund. And it shows the 2023-24 year and the 2024-25 year. So we call that fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. Both of those have been completed for ECAP. And you can see how many applications there were, how many awardees, and the total amount awarded to date. And then in the childcare row, you can see that the 2023-24 year has been completed, but the 2024-25 year hasn't opened yet. That's upcoming, and that's what we'll be requesting some feedback on later in this presentation. But you can see the number of applications we received in this last year, the number of awardees, how many types of each provider received an award, and that total awarded to date. These awards supported adding staff or increasing staff hours, therapeutic services, facility improvements to comply with ADA, that's American with Disabilities Act, accessibility or behavioral needs, and supportive and adaptive materials and equipment. Staffing remains the #1 most requested funding category for both of these award opportunities. And if we want to move on to the next slide, I'll pass it over to Melinda Waite, who will give us an overview, a little bit deeper of a look at both the ECAP and the Childcare Complex Needs Fund updates. Melinda?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I apologize that I'm not able to turn my video on. I am having some technical difficulties with my camera, so thank you for your patience with that. But it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for the introduction, Kelsey. I'll begin talking about the ECAP Complex Needs Fund. The intent for the ECAP Complex Needs Fund is to promote inclusive, least restrictive environments and to support ECAP contractors serving children who have developmental delays, disabilities, behavioral needs, and/or any other unique needs. Next slide, please. So this quote or feedback came from an ECAP contractor who received an ECAP Complex Needs Fund grant. And it says, "We now have a solid foundation of knowledge, skills, materials, and expertise that we can continue to build upon. We are thoughtful and intentional in using Complex Needs Fund to layer knowledge and embed strategies across our program. These funds are not just a one-time injection of resources, but are spent in ways that will continue to strengthen our system." Next slide, please. For fiscal year 2025, DCYF was able to award $7.8 million in funding for 48 ECAP contractors. And according to the application data, this funding will support 733 classrooms in 295 sites, and that will reach over 10,000 children. The total requests for funding for fiscal year 2025 totaled $16.6 million, which was more than double the amount that DCYF had available to give. Next slide, please. And as you can see in this chart, the ECAP Complex Needs Fund fiscal year 2025 funding allocation, according to application data, shows the largest portion of funding went to staffing needs. And I will pause here just for a moment so you can take a look at this chart and ask if there's any questions about. Okay, next slide, please. And we will go on to an overview of the Child Care Complex Needs Fund. The intent for the Child Care Complex Needs Fund is to promote inclusive, least restrictive environments and to support childcare providers serving children who have developmental delays, disabilities, behavioral needs, and/or other unique needs. Next slide, please. And the quote or feedback here is from a grantee. I'll read the Spanish first and then the English translation. Mi experiencia trabajando en el daycare con actividades financiadas con el fondo succionado para necesidades complejas ha sido de mucho éxito. Marcó positivamente los niños en mi daycare pueden ver sus caritas felices mientras se deslizan jugando afuera en sus triciclos. De esa forma, están desarrollando más su motor grueso al mismo tiempo, entregándose al resto del grupo. My experience working in daycare with activities financed by the Complex Needs Fund has been very successful. I highlight positively the children in my daycare. I can see their happy faces while they slide around playing outside on their tricycles. That way they are developing their gross motor more at the same time integrating with the rest of the group. And the next slide, please. And here is another quote or more feedback from another grantee. We've had enormous success with all of our learning tools and toys. We have children who could not express what they are feeling that have now found ways to do so with our feelings chart. We have children who would not interact with friends at their age that have now found common ground to initiate play with others and accept invitations to join the group. Our XYZ area, aka Quiet Cave, has become a favorite place for some of our busiest friends to decompress and snuggle. Watching the growth and joy our kids have found in all of our new activities has been so exciting to watch. Okay, and the next slide, please. In fiscal year 2024, DCYF received 852 applications for the Child Care Complex Needs Fund. These applications requested more than $78 million in funding. And DCYF was able to award $9.9 million in funding for 162 applications. The funding increase received from the legislature allowed DCYF to fund 61 more applications than the previous year. 19% of applications were funded, which was an increase from only 8.7% in fiscal year 2023. And let's see, looks like we have a question in the chat. I'll pause here for just a moment. And it says from Hodan, how diverse is the committee that oversees the Complex Needs Fund proposal? Are there members on the committee with lived experience related to the issues the fund addresses? The committee that oversees the complex needs. Hold on, are you referring to the review panel that makes funding determinations for the Complex Needs Fund grantees?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. So the review panel that makes funding determinations for the Complex Needs Fund are made up of subject matter experts that work in the field with childcare providers with children with complex needs. And when it comes, let's see, to the diversity of that committee, I'm not sure I have that exact answer for you at this time. Don't believe that that's data that we collect because those who represent the, or those who are on the review panel are asked to be on the panel for their subject matter expertise. So may have to get back to you on that. Let me just take a moment and make a note here.
Are they subject matter experts within DCYF or outside of DCYF?
They're within DCYF.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, give me one moment to make this.
Now, while Melinda's taking a note, I can jump in just to say that the review panel for the Child Care Complex Needs Fund is made up of DCYF staff who are representing infant and early childhood mental health, tribal licensing, and various other representation within DCYF of experts who are working closely with complex needs. There are not currently parents or community members involved in this particular grant opportunity. To answer your question in the chat, hold on.
Great. And then I see in the chat that Marlene said Jacqueline has her hand raised. Did you have a question?
Sí, correcto. Mi pregunta es, tengo varios años llenando la aplicación para las necesidades del grant para necesidades complejas y no siempre me dicen que le falta peso a mi aplicación. No me he tratado de comunicar con las diferentes áreas que dicen que tienen personal para ayudar a llenar esa aplicación y pues no, nunca he recibido la ayuda y no sé por qué falta peso, qué es lo que define que una aplicación sea aceptada o sea rechazada. Esa es mi pregunta porque ya he aplicado varios años. Pues ya he aplicado más de 2 años. Gracias.
Gracias,
Okay, I'm
Jacqueline.
gonna try to, oh, Melinda, do you understand what she asked, or do you want me to help you interpret what Maria
Yes,
said?
if you would like to for the good of the group, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, so she's, okay, and I was trying to write it as she was talking, so if I missed something, hopefully she's listening in Spanish in the channel, so hopefully she'll clarify me, but she's applied several times for the complex needs grant, and there's always, like there's something missing, and she's gone to the TA folks asking for assistance, and they haven't been giving her a clear answer. So she's wanting to know what are those like outliners that allow a participant to receive the fund or not. Like what is the criteria?
Sure, and that's a great question. So all applications, when they receive the eligibility criteria is applied. Eligible providers include open license, certified or certified for payment only childcare providers, and license exempt family, friend, and neighbor or FFN providers who have served at least one child on subsidy in 4 of the past 6 months or 2 of the past 3 months and claim for subsidy through the Social Service Payment System, SSPS system, at the time of the application. To be eligible, all providers must have children currently enrolled in their care who have behavioral needs, developmental delays, and disabilities or any other unique needs. When all applications are received, they go through an initial scoring process using the scoring rubric that is posted on the Child Care Complex Needs Fund website. And all of those providers must have an average score of 9 points or higher before receiving bonus points to continue on for the review panel. And then the review panel makes their funding determinations. With regard to Jacqueline's specific application, I can't speak to that at this time without looking at it specifically, but I can offer that we do contract with the Imagine Institute for Technical Assistance, and they do have the ability to review any of her previous applications for the Complex Needs Fund with her to go through them question by question and offer any feedback on that. Okay. And Just gonna take a moment and look into the chat. Okay, Gloria says here, because most of all family childcare providers apply every year. Let's see, I believe Kelsey, did you, yep, Kelsey responded to that. Okay. Janelle says we were one of the grant recipients and we are so thankful for the grant team and these funds. Licensed family home, approximately $60,000. Thank you so much. Thank you for that feedback, Janelle. Let's see. Okay. And thank you, Kelsey, for responding to Julie's question. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next slide.
I think we have a couple of hands up still. Hold on, or Jacqueline, do you still have questions?
Yes, I do. I was just reading the chat. A mother with a child with special need. I just want to add, I think it was back in the day, it was very, very hard to find a childcare, you know, that really accommodate my child's need. And hearing these grants, thank you for offering these opportunities to our community. But just reading one of the questions, for example, let's say one of the providers at that time do not have a kid that has not enrolled a child with special need yet, but you know, let's say a month later, you get a couple of kids that come in. So, I mean, what do they supposed to do? Is there any way, because you're giving a timeline for people to apply for these complex needs. And if they're not with that timeline and they don't have kids in there, that is not enrolled in their center or home, they're not be able to qualify. So I'm just wondering, would they be an exception to the rules? Is there something that you guys can do, DCY, that can put a certain amount of money on a side where these folks can utilize those fundings? Because what I know is even requesting special needs rate is not a lot. And when kids come in, these providers need to be prepared because they have a lot of challenges, and we want to make sure that we include them in the setting, they're providing their needs, that, you know, inclusive settings, their safety and everything is being provided, but it's been rarely, just here in the community, it's been very difficult. And I'm just wondering, and you know, and I know you guys are doing the best you can. I'm just wondering if you can go back to the legislator or anyone who is the decision making, if there's some way that we can put it in an exception to the rules where providers can access some dollars amount of money, or a little short proposal for the kids that they have in their centers or their home. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on. We will make note of that. I really appreciate you taking the time to share that feedback. I can say that right now, as it stands currently, the funding we have is so limited that was where we drew that eligibility line, is that these funds were for providers who have children enrolled in their care who have these needs. And so trying to direct that money to support them, as opposed to somebody who might in the future but doesn't right now, when the needs are so great everywhere and we only have limited funds. But I absolutely will take this and make note of it, because we do want that kind of feedback and we do want to hear from you. So thank you very much. Jacqueline, do you have a question too?
No, pero ya bajé la mano, pero no, ¿se sigue mirando?
Ya te la bajé, Jacqueline.
Oh, gracias.
I'll send it back to you, Melinda.
Thank you. Okay. So the map in front of you is just a brief overview showing the 2023-2024 complex needs fund distribution throughout the state. And we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what's working when it comes to the Child Care Complex Needs Fund? 98% of quarterly surveys reported a positive experience receiving Child Care Complex Needs Fund awards, and 40% of the quarterly surveys listed specific positive outcomes achieved for children with complex needs. And here is a sample of some of these specific positive outcomes that providers reported. Children learning to identify their feelings using supportive and adaptive materials. Supportive and adaptive materials to create inclusive spaces for children with complex needs. Learning tools purchased supported speech development and language growth. A decrease in disruptive behaviors. An increase in emotional regulation with sensory equipment. An increased sense of security for children with calming materials and equipment. And improved access to resources that support inclusivity for children with complex needs. As previously mentioned, technical assistance is available through the Imagine Institute, and we'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming slide. DCYF is also instituting more pre-award and post-award support. And ECAP Complex Needs Fund is reaching more contractors each year. And I see a comment in the chat from Hodan. Is technical assistance free and available for providers? If so, it would be helpful to clearly state this in the proposal. Additionally, it would be valuable to survey those who have utilized TA services to understand how effective they found it. Thank you, Kelsey. Appreciate you giving that response. Awesome. Okay, and we'll move on to the next slide, please.
If I could just interject for a minute, she did ask if it was free through Imagine. Is that one that you can answer?
Yes, yes. Technical assistance is available at no cost to the providers.
It would be nice if that was on the slides and in all of the information, because I mean, I didn't know that either. So that's good to know.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. We'll make sure to add that. Okay. So when it comes to Childcare Complex Needs Fund, here's some areas that we identified what could be refined. Clarity around license ECAP and how to access the funds. The second is that we've learned that it is difficult to recruit, hire, and retain staffing that directly support children with complex needs. Third, more providers want an opportunity to receive an award. Fourth, refine policy around spend categories, eligible and ineligible expenses. And fifth is to streamline ECAP Complex Needs Fund application. And the next slide, please. And so here we are at our technical assistance. So we contract with the Imagine Institute to provide technical assistance and language access to childcare providers applying for and accessing grants. This support looks like comprehensive support. So assistance when it comes to applying, both, excuse me, I trip over my words, and offering language access, support with receipt and documentation assistance, answering questions on eligible and ineligible costs. There are group technical assistance sessions, including question and answers. There is pre-award guidance and quarterly survey support and outreach. Next slide.
Oh, can I ask a question about with regard to the technical assistance? When a grant is denied, is there an opportunity to get support for and reasons why it was denied and what can be done to make the grant application stronger the next go around?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, providers are more than welcome to take their applications to the Imagine Institute, and they can review them with you one-on-one and provide any feedback regarding your application. Great question.
Some people are those professional grant writers that are giving that guidance, or what's the qualifications of those people giving the TA in that regard?
I can speak to that, Melinda.
Thank you.
So the technical assistance specialists at the Imagine Institute are most often a peer-to-peer model where the Imagine Institute hires people who are childcare providers so that there's a peer support element to this. They're also trained by DCYF. So DCYF works with these technical assistance providers on the rules and requirements around the grant, on the rubric that we use to score grant applications, on the processes and procedures that we followed throughout. So they're not professional grant writers for any grant, but they're very much trained on these specific grants.
Thank you.
Okay, so we would like to share some of the positive feedback that we've received from providers about our technical assistance partners, the Imagine Institute. The first says, I'm immensely grateful for the invaluable support I received from the Imagine Institute. Despite being on vacation, the individual who assisted me offered exceptional guidance and direction, significantly expediting my grant application process. Their contribution played a pivotal role in enabling me to complete my task ahead of schedule, and I am truly appreciative of their efforts. And the next says, they were really helpful. I was able to understand everything in my language. And lastly, I accessed the assistance because I was seeking clarification and guidance to better understand the grant requirements and processes. The assistance provided me with valuable information and insights that helped me navigate the grant application effectively. I appreciate the support and found it instrumental in gaining a clearer understanding of the grant and its potential impact. Thank you for the assistance rendered. Next slide. Oh, I see a message in the chat from Julie. How do you collect feedback? Clearly, some providers here did not have a similarly positive experience. So after the grant awards are, thank you, after the grant awards are given out, we send out a quarterly survey, a quarterly progress update where providers complete 10 questions regarding the status of their grant, whether they've spent the grant funds, if they're experiencing any challenges or what outcomes they're receiving. And so that's the means of feedback that we collect.
I'll jump into and add that we have started adding questions about technical assistance and any feedback on technical assistance in the grant application itself for our early childhood equity grant, which is also supported with technical assistance by the Imagine Institute. And I think we're hoping to expand that to our other grant applications too, to be able to continuously collect that feedback. We also did a train the trainer with the Imagine Institute, and we can provide additional training details in the feedback loop too. That was in response to Lois's question in the chat, sorry.
It's nice that you guys are highlighting the positive experiences, but what happens when you guys get feedback submitted that is not so positive? Where does that go?
Absolutely. We do share that feedback with the Imagine Institute and talk through if somebody has a specific complaint or issue that they had with their experience with technical assistance. We talk it through with the Imagine Institute, and they can sometimes pull up call logs and try to help, go backwards to see where a communication might have broken down or what might have happened.
Okay, I'm going to apologize for saying this. I can't think of a different word to use, but it feels a little bit like gaslighting when you are only showing the positives rather than coming in here and saying, providers have shared that they have had some difficulty with the TA from Imagine for these reasons, but we're working with them to make sure that everyone has a positive experience. It just, to only show the positive, it's not a balanced view of what providers are experiencing. Lois, did you still have something you wanted to add or ask?
I did. I just wanted to clarify. I know she did speak to that a little bit. The part I didn't hear is about in these trainings, how are you usually a racial equity lens, and the feedback loop is fine on that question. But I also would like to know, and I'm sorry if I missed this, what the breakdown is between centers and homes in receiving this grant. Because there's always that conflict in my eyes, maybe not in someone else's, but with Imagine Institute being an offshoot of SEIU 925. It seems like there's a a larger amount of TA that is provided. Some may argue that it is needed for family home providers. I would say that there is just as great a need with centers as well, especially for small centers, because of the lack of capacity to be able to be able to complete grant applications and that type of thing. So that is why I'm asking what the breakdown is in recipients, as well as be able to have that, as Julie had just stated, that, you know, information about those who may have had challenges and what is being done to ensure if in the next round that they are supported in a way that meets their needs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lois, for that. I did just put the breakdown in the chat for you. There was 162 total grants in fiscal year 2024 for this opportunity. 86 of the awardees were centers, 69 of them were licensed family homes, 5 of them were family, friend, and neighbor providers, and 2 of them were tribal providers. And we did share that earlier, but it was in a table and it was hard to catch, so I apologize for not highlighting that. I will make sure to include information in a feedback loop to respond to more about how the technical assistance team is trained. But we absolutely do try to address things like language access and not paying attention to grammar or sentence structure. Like, that's not a reason that a grant application would be scored poorly or anything like that. So we'll make sure to follow up on that in writing.
Yeah, thank you. And not just the TA folks that are helping, but also the team that is reviewing the applications, because they're the gatekeepers. So they're the ones who really need to, it's really important for them to also receive that training, because again, they're the gatekeepers. They're the one who decides who has access and who does not.
Yes, and we do have trainings for them too. So we'll be sure to follow up about that. Thank you. And Julie, thank you for your feedback too. I appreciate that. We want to be able to celebrate the successes, but we also understand that sometimes the feedback we receive is not all positive. And I think you'll see some of that in our next slides too.
Okay, I would just hate for somebody to think, why is it just me that's struggling? I heard that they're so great and everyone had a great experience. So I want to go to Susan. She's got her hand up.
Thanks, Julie. The bit of feedback I wanted to offer with regard to the reviewing of the grants, so that do you guys remove, whether it's a family home, like remove any of the identifying factors and just review the strength of the grant? Or are people aware that it's a center or a family home or when they're reviewing those grants?
I know that we remove identifying information. Melinda, I'm going to ask you if we remove the facility type or not from scoring, because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yes, we do. We remove all identifying information from all applications, both before the scoring process and before the review panel.
Thank you. That's great to hear. It's one step towards using an anti-racist lens and removing bias from the process. That's comforting to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all of that feedback. And now there's time for more feedback. So what we have planned for the rest of our time together in this presentation is we have six questions for you, 6 prompts, if you will, for feedback. And I'm going to go over each of those prompts just to talk it through and provide a little bit of context behind them. And then what we'll do is we'll break out into a breakout groups, and there's a Jamboard, and the Jamboard link is already in the chat. And on that Jamboard will be those 6 prompts, and we're hoping that you can spend some time in small discussion groups and add your sticky notes in with some of your reactions and feedback to these prompts. So the first one here is about pre-award technical assistance. So something that DCYF has started implementing with other grants to better help grantees understand and comply with the terms and conditions of the grant, we've implemented a new pre-award technical assistance session. So this session is intended to give awardees a refresher on what they attested to on their application, that they agreed to spend the funds on the items requested on their approved application, to remind them about receipt reviews and ensure that they have an understanding of the requirements before they receive the money. So our first prompt question is related to that. What other information should DCYF include in these sessions to help set providers up for success in managing their award and carrying out their grant activities? We want to provide as much technical assistance and support as we can before the award, after the award, during the award. So would love to hear your feedback on that. We can move to the next slide. The second prompt question that you'll see on the Jamboard is about licensed ECAP. The Fair Start for Kids Act set up two separate complex needs funds. One is for licensed childcare and one is for ECAP contractors and providers. DCYF hasn't been able to allow double dipping, which means one provider receiving both ECAP and childcare complex needs funds. And so currently where we've drawn that line for eligibility is that licensed providers serving ECAP slots must access the ECAP complex needs fund through their contractor. And we recognize that this approach has raised concerns. We've heard a lot of concerns about this. With approximately half of all ECAP sites being licensed, we're just looking for your feedback and suggestions on a more equitable approach. How can DCYF administer two complex needs funds in a way that works better for licensed ECAP while still staying in line with state auditing requirements and ensuring no double dipping? So that's been a tricky one for us to think through, and we'll just love your partnership on that. If we go to the next slide, the third prompt is about staffing challenges. So the most requested use of funds for the Childcare Complex Needs Fund is for adding staff. 90% of the most recent award dollars went towards staffing costs. But because this grant is competitive and is not a stable, ongoing source of funding for providers, we're concerned that we might be doing grantees a disservice and setting them up for difficulties retaining those positions once the grant has ended. So we'd like to hear some feedback on ways we can address this. For example, would it be better to move away from using grant funds for adding staff and award more funds for true one-time costs, such as equipment and accessibility improvements? Or perhaps focus the staffing category on recruitment efforts and hiring bonuses for new complex needs staff instead of their salary? Just some thoughts, and would love to hear, any other reactions or feedback to that. It's just one of the things that we're thinking about. The next slide. Oh, I see some hands up.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in real quick. If we're going to do breakout rooms, we literally have 15 minutes left. So we're going to hold questions until we get in breakout rooms, and then we're going to come back.
Thanks, Julie. The next one is just about the concept of increases. So the current maximum amount that a provider can request for this grant is $100,000. But we are hearing more about so few providers receive this grant. Would it be better to have a smaller maximum amount so that we can reach more providers and award more grants? And so our question to you here is, what strikes a good balance between offering meaningful amounts and maximizing the number of providers and children we can reach with these dollars? And then there's just some numbers there about, how many more providers we could reach with lower cap amounts. The next slide is about new versus continuing funding requests. And the context here is because these grants are competitive and funding is not guaranteed, our current policy is that the grant is to fund new supports for children with complex needs and not to maintain existing supports, even if those supports were previously funded by a complex needs fund award. But we're hearing from providers that they want to use complex needs funds to continue paying a staff member that they hired with a previous complex needs fund award, for example. And so the question here is, should we adjust the grant to allow funding requests to maintain existing supports? And if we do, how should we balance or prioritize requests for new funding versus requests for continued funding? And then the last prompt that you'll see is about the way that these awards are paid. Currently, we pay out as a lump sum. You get a check for the full amount of your grant, and then you have to save your receipts and hold on to them and track your spending, because after the spending period has passed, we do a sample and we do a receipt review to make sure that funding was spent in accordance with the grant application. But we've heard some feedback that having it available as an incremental reimbursement, where you can claim funds as they are spent throughout the year by submitting like an invoice and receipts, might be a preferred way to receive funds. So we'll like to know how you think about that and if there are benefits or impacts. So those are the 6 prompts. I know that's a lot. The chat has a link to the Jamboard in it. And I believe that Erin will be able to put you in some breakout groups for discussion.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that because we're really ending our time on this. We are down to like 12 minutes left, and I just don't know that everybody has the link. So I'm wondering, first of all, Kelsey, how long the Jamboard, or maybe this goes to Jessica, how long the Jamboard will be available for folks to do feedback on beyond the meeting?
I would love for us to leave this Jamboard open beyond this meeting for several days for people to be able to put their feedback in, but I don't know if there's any rules around that. Can Jessica, do you have thoughts on, or Erin?
This is Amy, and I just want to jump in and say,
oh, you're muted again, Amy.
This is also taking time for us to decide this, so I don't know if it's worth having questions we put in the chat instead of going into breakout groups. But as we're trying to resolve this issue, we're cutting into the minutes.
I think we just don't have enough time to do breakout rooms at this point. I think it's better to go with questions. When we do breakout rooms, it's always beneficial to come back and hear what folks thought about and asked about, and still, so I would suggest that everybody use the Jamboard now and later, tomorrow, whenever you want, but it's important to get the questions answered that people still have about all of these. So 10 minutes just isn't enough to do Jamboards on all of these very complex questions. Can we go to those that had questions? I don't remember who all had questions, but I remember Susan's hand was up.
My 2 cents worth is that when you have a limited pot of money, and because staffing is like in many cases, or in my case, 80% of my budget, it doesn't, and I don't know what it is for it seems to me like one-time funding at least would make the funds go further, for equipment and supplies. Staffing is a big bucket of money, and I just don't, I don't see it as sustainable until we can, fully address the whole concept of complex needs, as it shouldn't be competitive. It should be part of how we're funded as a system. So having written many grants to funders all over the place and always getting the answer back, or many times we had way more applications than we have funding, that if we have an opportunity to redesign this so we can spread the resources a little further because we're all in crisis, that would be what I would recommend.
I agree with what Susan said and what I was going to put on, and I could still put on the Jamboard. It does feel that because it's competitive, we didn't apply this. We haven't applied it a couple times because we feel like it's also very difficult to say that our needs are bigger or more pressing than another center's needs. And so I do wonder if there is a way to make the funds go further in some way.
Thank you, Darlene and Susan. I'm making a note here of your comments, but also please feel free to put it in the Jamboard too, so we have it all together. That's really helpful to hear your feedback.
Do we have other questions?
Do we have another presentation after this, Julie?
We do not. We've got the Menti and the feedback survey, and then it'll just would go to Katie to close us out.
Okay, yeah, we're getting feedback from early learning. They would really like the feedback from the providers on the Jamboard, and if there's any way they can do it, to please consider it.
I mean, if they want to move just the providers into one Jamboard or one breakout room for 5 minutes.
Julie, oh,
I'm not sure what's going on. I know Amy has tried to talk a couple of times, but it keeps remuting every time she tries to talk. You're not muted now.
I apologize. I've got some weird speaker issue. What we really want is just feedback on the Jamboard. It's okay if we don't go to breakout rooms. I absolutely understand that it's time to wrap up, but feedback in writing on the Jamboard is what we would love. It would be very, very helpful for us, and we will leave it open as long as they let us. It sounds like till the end of the week. It's a really great tool to have that though, so we can collect it and be able to discuss it, and not just our notes that were captured individually. And so if you're willing, participants, to use the Jamboard, that would be great. We do not have to do breakouts for it, and you don't have to do it in this moment. You can wait till later today, after you've had time to think about what was presented.
That's great. Thank you. And thanks for leaving the link open for a couple of days. Lois, did you have a question or comment?
I do have a comment. So my suggestion to the CE team, as well as for the group, is it possible to leave the Jamboard up and open at least for a week? So you have time to send out the link to those who are in provider supports, as well as for folk to have time to share out with their network. For some providers, they may not have time to respond by Friday, and being able to have at least one weekend, I believe, would be helpful. It would give people time to be able to really think about their responses, especially with this impacting the field in such a great way as we're looking for sustainable solutions to this funding stream. So just checking to see if the CE team and Amy, if your group would be open to that, so we can share this out a little bit more broadly, as well as to give even those here on that are participating time.
I say yes, absolutely. I think that would be great, as long as that doesn't conflict with anything that community engagement typically lets us do. Yes, please. Thanks, Lois.
Okay, and we've got a hand up from Darlene.
Yeah, sorry. I clicked on the Jamboard just to see, make sure I had it saved so I can go back to it. And Kelsey, you gave a lot more information than what is posted on the Jamboard. And since we're switching gears to doing this sort of offline, I'm wondering if there's a way for more content to be put on the Jamboard rather than just the question alone, so that those who are not on this call actually can hear the information that you provided in the slides. Like, is there a way to attach the slide to each, I don't know, in some way, just so that that information is there?
I totally hear what you're saying, Darlene. I do have longer versions of these questions that have the context embedded, and I was trying to avoid, giving too much text to be overwhelming, but if it's helpful for me to add that back in, I can put that in.
I think that it's just going to be because we're not doing it in a breakout session, coming back to it later, we're not going to, some people might not have that information in their mind anymore. And so it's just limited.
Yeah, that's something I should be able to do. I should be able to edit that now.
That's great. Thank you.
Who's that up to? Whether it stays up longer? Because I feel like Amy said yes, and oh, Marlene said yeah. Okay, Marlene said yes, so that's good. Okay, any other questions? Hopefully everybody's just working on the Jamboard right now. Kelsey, is there one question from all of those questions that you just want to point out or throw out to the group as one you guys are really needing the most?
Boy, that's good. I think the two big, I'm going to give you two because I can't follow the rules. Sorry. The two big ones that are weighing on me are how can we be more equitable to licensed ECAP? When we know that that's a sticking point for a lot of providers is which grant do they apply to and how do we make that work? And then the other one is really I'm hearing feedback from both sides of this issue, but the staffing issue of is it better to award more funds for true one-time costs, or is it better to award funds for staffing even though those funds aren't sustainable funds? And how do we balance that? Those are the ones that I'd really love to hear some feedback on.
Are those slides 2 and 3?
Oh, good question. Slides 2 and yes, 2 and 3. You're correct.
Okay, excellent. It's a lot. You've got lengthy questions up there.
I know, and these are the shortened ones.
Okay. All right, I am gonna thank you guys for coming. Providers, please, especially if you have applied for a complex needs, your feedback is needed, even if you didn't get it, it might be helpful. And we are ready to move on to the wrap up, which is, hey, I'm going to go over to Katie, but also we need the Menti link. There we go. The Menti link so that we can provide feedback on this topic of the complex needs. So thank you to Kelsey and to Melinda for coming, explaining, asking good questions for feedback today. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Today we're full of information, lots of feedback going back and forth. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to take our meeting reflection survey, not the Menti, but to reflect on the meeting as a whole. We really want providers to be able to say what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see in the future, what information helped them with their center, maybe specifically, anything to help us in community engagement and the provider supports team so that we can keep moving with these meetings and providing information that you guys want. I can't believe we're already looking at October, but our next meeting is October 9th. That is crazy. It is almost time for school to go back. My kids, I'm ready for the summer to be done. I don't know about anybody else out there, mom and dads, but I'm ready for them to go back to school. But yeah, so we would love to have your reflections, any information, any topics you want to see in the future, and questions. And other than that, we just want to thank everybody for joining us, everybody from DCYF. Today was a great meeting.
All right, well, thanks everyone for coming and have a great rest of your day.